They called her invisible, the forgotten daughter, the shadow in the corner while her perfect sister glowed under crystal chandeliers. But tonight, everything would shatter, because the most dangerous man in the city didn't want the golden child everyone expected him to marry. He wanted her. And when Adrian Volkov walked into that glittering dining room and destroyed her sister's engagement with 5 cold words, Elena Whitmore's entire world exploded into something she never saw coming. This is a story about the girl no one noticed, until someone did. Hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The champagne tasted like lies. Elena held the crystal flute without drinking, watching bubbles rise and burst against the rim. Around her, the Whitmore family dining room blazed with enough candlelight to stage a small wedding, which was essentially the point. Her mother had outdone herself, white roses cascading from silver vases, each place setting worth more than most people earned in a month, servers gliding between chairs like well-trained ghosts. "To Victoria and Adrian," her father announced, raising his glass. Richard Whitmore's voice carried the particular smugness of a man who'd just closed a deal he had no business winning. To family, to fortune, and to a future that will elevate the Whitmore name beyond anything we've achieved. Elena watched her sister smile. Victoria knew exactly how to angle her face to catch the light, how to let her eyes shine with just enough moisture to suggest deep emotion without actual tears that might smudge her makeup. It was a talent Elena had never mastered, this performance of perfection. "Hear, hear," echoed around the table. 12 people, all dressed like they were attending a state dinner, all pretending this wasn't exactly what it was. A transaction dressed in romance. Elena set down her untouched champagne and reached for her water instead. "Elena, darling, at least pretend to celebrate your sister's good fortune." Her mother's voice could slice through steel when she wanted it to. Catherine Whitmore smiled while she said it, because everything was about appearances, but her eyes promised consequences later. "Of course, Mother. Congratulations, Victoria." Elena lifted her water glass slightly. Her sister didn't even glance her direction. That was normal. Elena had stopped expecting acknowledgement somewhere around her 16th birthday, the year Victoria made her debut in society, and Elena realized she would always be the understudy in her own family. Not quite pretty enough, not quite charming enough, not quite anything enough to warrant the kind of attention her older sister commanded simply by existing. "Adrian should be here any moment," Victoria purred, checking her phone with practiced casualness, as if she wasn't desperate for validation. "He texted that he's on his way." More champagne appeared. Elena's uncle started a story about meeting someone important at his club. Her cousin laughed too loudly at nothing. The whole scene felt like a play Elena had been forced to attend too many times, knowing all the lines, hating every minute. She'd met Adrian Volkov exactly once, 3 months ago at some charity gala her parents had dragged her to. While Victoria had circled him like a shark scenting blood, Elena had ended up in an alcove with a book she'd smuggled in her purse, trying to survive the evening. He'd found her there by accident, or so she'd thought, seeking escape from the crowds himself. They'd talked for maybe 20 minutes. He hadn't asked what she did, or who her family was, or any of the standard questions people used as weapons in these circles. Instead, he'd noticed her book, a worn paperback about landscape architecture, and asked if she actually cared about the subject, or was just hiding. Both, she'd admitted, and he'd laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite corporate chuckle most men deployed at these events. They'd discussed green spaces and urban planning, the politics of park funding, the way cities forgot that people needed beauty alongside function. It had been the most genuine conversation she'd had in months. Then Victoria had appeared, gravitational and gleaming. And Elena had watched Adrian's face shift into something more careful, more controlled. Her sister had looped her arm through his with practiced possession, and Elena had slipped away into the crowd, back to being invisible. She'd thought about that conversation more than she wanted to admit, not because she harbored any illusions about Adrian Volkov. The man was a known entity, powerful and dangerous in ways her family found thrilling precisely because they thought they could harness it through marriage. But for 20 minutes, someone had talked to her like she mattered, like her thoughts were worth hearing. That was probably pathetic. Elena knew it was pathetic, but she'd learned to take small mercies where she found them. "He's here!" Victoria jumped up, smoothing her dress, ivory silk that probably cost more than a used car. "Do I look all right?" "You look perfect, sweetheart." their mother assured her, which was true. Victoria always looked perfect. It was her superpower. Elena heard the commotion in the foyer, male voices conferring with the household staff. Her father stood, straightening his tie, preparing to greet the man who would supposedly join their family. The man who controlled enough of the city's real estate and development projects to make or break careers with a phone call. The man who, according to whispered rumors, had connections that made people nervous to say his name too loudly. The dining room doors opened. Adrian Volkov didn't walk into a room so much as change its entire atmosphere. He was tall, dark-haired, expensively dressed in a way that suggested the suit had been custom-made to precise specifications. But it wasn't the appearance that commanded attention. It was the energy, the sense that everything around him existed at his discretion, that he'd decided to grant this moment his presence rather than being obligated to attend. Adrian, darling, Victoria moved forward, hands extended, ready to claim her prize in front of witnesses. He stopped 3 feet away from her, didn't take her hands. His expression was perfectly neutral, which somehow made the moment worse. Victoria, his voice carried no warmth. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for the invitation. Elena watched her father's smile falter slightly. This wasn't the tone of a man arriving to celebrate his engagement. This was something else entirely. Well, don't just stand there. Come in. Sit down. Catherine gestured to the empty chair beside Victoria, the place of honor that had been waiting for him. We have so much to celebrate, and I won't be staying for dinner. Adrian's words dropped into the room like stones into still water. I came to handle this in person because it seemed appropriate, despite the inconvenience. Elena felt her stomach drop. She knew that tone. She'd heard it deployed in business contexts, on conference calls her father thought were private, in hallways where deals died quietly. That was the voice of someone delivering news that would not be negotiated. Handle what, exactly? Richard's corporate smile was cracking at the edges. If this is about the prenuptial negotiations, I assure you our lawyers can... There won't be lawyers. There won't be a prenuptial. There won't be a wedding. Adrian's gaze moved across the assembled family with the kind of clinical assessment Elena associated with people evaluating property for demolition. I'm ending the engagement. As of this moment, any understanding between our families is dissolved. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Victoria's face went through several colors Elena had never seen on human skin before. Her mother looked like she'd been struck. Her father's expression shifted from confusion to rage in the span of a heartbeat. You can't be serious. Richard's voice climbed toward anger, then forcibly corrected back toward reason. Adrian, if there's been some misunderstanding, we can certainly discuss. There's no misunderstanding. I don't want to marry your daughter. I never did. Adrian's delivery was so matter-of-fact it almost sounded polite. The arrangement was proposed by your family, and I allowed the preliminary discussions to continue longer than I should have. That was my mistake. I'm correcting it now. How dare you? Catherine found her voice shrill with shock. You've humiliated Victoria in front of our entire family. You've made commitments, public statements. I've made no public statements regarding marriage. Any announcements your family chose to circulate were premature at best, fabricated at worst. He turned to Victoria, who stood frozen like someone had paused her mid-performance. You're attractive, accomplished, and capable. I'm sure you'll find someone more suited to your expectations, but it won't be me. Victoria's mouth opened and closed. No sound emerged. Elena had never seen her sister at a loss for words, had never witnessed the machinery of her charm grind to a halt like this. It was horrible to watch. Despite everything, despite the years of being overlooked and dismissed, Elena felt a sharp stab of sympathy. This is unconscionable. Richard moved toward Adrian like he might physically block his exit. Do you have any idea what this will do to Victoria's reputation, to our family's standing? Yes. Adrian didn't step back, didn't flinch. But that's not my concern. Your family chose to treat a preliminary conversation as a binding agreement. That was your choice. I'm making mine. You arrogant... Richard started, but Adrian cut him off with a look that made Elena's father actually take a step backward. I'd suggest not finishing that sentence. The temperature in Adrian's voice dropped 20 degrees. I came here as a courtesy, to handle this with some discretion. But if you'd prefer I make a public statement about why I'm declining this arrangement, including details about certain business practices your family has engaged in while assuming I'd overlook them due to the engagement, I'm happy to arrange a press conference. The color drained from Richard's face. Whatever Adrian was referencing, it landed like a physical blow. Catherine recovered first, switching tactics with the speed of someone used to social warfare. If this is about dowry, about the business merger terms, I'm sure we can find a more generous arrangement. It's not about money. Adrian's attention shifted, scanning the room again, and for a fraction of a second his eyes caught Elena's before moving on. It's about fundamental incompatibility. Your daughter wants a symbol to marry. I'm not interested in being symbolic. Victoria finally found words. You told me. Her voice broke, genuine hurt cracking through the performance. You said I was everything you admired in a woman. I said you were accomplished, which you are. Adrian's expression didn't soften. But admiration isn't love, and accomplishment isn't compatibility. I apologize if you interpreted professional courtesy as emotional commitment. It was brutal. Elena watched her sister crumble in real time, watched the careful architecture of Victoria's self-image collapse. Part of her wanted to look away. Part of her couldn't. Get out! Richard's voice shook. Get out of my house before I have you thrown out. I'm leaving. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused, turning back with the air of someone who'd just remembered an afterthought. Actually, there is one more matter to address before I go. I think you've done enough damage for one evening, Catherine hissed. Nevertheless, Adrian's gaze found Elena again, and this time it stayed there. I'd like to speak with your younger daughter, privately. The room went completely silent. Elena felt every eye turn toward her. Her mother's expression cycled through confusion, suspicion, and dawning horror. Victoria's face transformed into something Elena had never seen directed at her before. Pure, undiluted rage. Absolutely not. Richard moved between Adrian and Elena like he was protecting valuable property. You've insulted one daughter. You're not getting anywhere near the other. I'm asking for a conversation, not permission to damage anyone. Adrian's tone suggested he found Richard's posturing tedious. If Elena is willing to speak with me, I'd appreciate 10 minutes of her time. If not, I'll leave, and this matter is closed. Elena should have said no. Every instinct screamed at her to keep her head down, to let this disaster play out without making it worse by becoming part of it. She had perfected the art of being invisible specifically to avoid moments like this. But something in the way Adrian looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her like she was an actual person whose answer mattered, made her pause. Elena, do not... Her mother started. It's fine. Elena heard herself speak before she'd consciously decided to. I'll talk to him. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. You can't be serious, Elena. If you do this, It's just a conversation. Elena stood, legs shaky but functional. It's fine. It was not fine. Nothing about this was fine. But Elena had spent 24 years being fine, being quiet, being whatever her family needed her to be to maintain their perfect image. Maybe she had 10 minutes of not being fine left in her. The library, she told Adrian, who nodded once. She walked out of the dining room ahead of him, feeling the weight of her family's stares like hands trying to pull her back. The hallway seemed longer than usual, her footsteps too loud on marble floors. The library door was heavy oak, the kind of architectural detail her mother loved because it suggested old money they didn't actually have. Elena pushed it open and stepped inside. Adrian followed, closing the door behind them with a soft click that felt horribly final. The library was her favorite room in the house, possibly because no one else ever used it. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined 3 walls, filled with books her parents had purchased by the yard for aesthetic purposes. A few were Elena's actual books, the ones she'd read until the spines cracked, but most were just decoration. She turned to face him, arms crossed, trying to project some kind of confidence she absolutely didn't feel. I assume you didn't just blow up my sister's engagement to discuss landscape architecture. Adrian almost smiled. Almost. No, though that was a good conversation. You remember that? I remember most things that matter. He studied her with the same intensity she remembered from that night, the sense that he actually saw what he was looking at. You've changed your hair. Elena's hand went automatically to the shorter cut she'd gotten last month. A small rebellion her mother had hated. I needed a change. It suits you better. He moved further into the room, not approaching her but shifting position enough that she could see him without craning her neck. I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to understand that I'm serious. This isn't a game. It's not revenge on your family, and it's not a whim. Okay? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. What? I want to offer you a contract marriage. 12 months, clearly defined terms, appropriate compensation, and a clean exit at the end. You would live in my home, attend necessary social functions as my wife, and in exchange, you'd have complete financial independence when it's done. No strings, no obligations beyond the agreed time frame. For several seconds, Elena just stared at him. Then she laughed, a sharp bark of sound that came out more hysterical than she'd intended. You're insane. Possibly, but I'm also serious. You just humiliated my sister in front of our entire family, and now you want to marry me instead? As what, some kind of punishment for them? Elena shook her head, feeling unmoored from reality. That's the most vindictive thing I've ever heard. It's not about them. It's about you. Adrian's expression didn't change. I've spent 3 months watching your sister perform for me, trying to become whatever she thought I wanted. It was exhausting and dishonest. You, on the other hand, were the only person who talked to me like I was an actual human being, rather than a prize to win or a threat to manage. We talked for 20 minutes about parks. Best 20 minutes of that entire evening. He said it like it was a simple fact. Look, I need a wife for business reasons, perception management, social expectations, the kind of tedious political maneuvering that comes with my position. I don't need love. I don't want performance. I need someone who can be present without pretending we're in some kind of romance novel. Elena felt like reality had shifted sideways. And you think I'm that person because we had one decent conversation? I think you're that person because you don't want anything from me. Adrian moved closer, not threatening, but deliberate. Everyone wants something: power, money, status, access. You didn't even want to talk to me. You wanted to read your book and survive a boring event. That's the most honest interaction I've had in years. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Probably accurate. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to identify. But it's also true. I'm offering you an exit, Elena. From this house, from your family's expectations, from being invisible. 12 months of playing a role in exchange for enough money to build whatever life you want afterward. You'd be free. The word hung in the air between them. Free. When was the last time Elena had felt free? Had she ever? This is crazy, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Agree to think about it. I'll have my lawyer draw up a contract with explicit terms, compensation, living arrangements, expectations, exit clauses. If you read it and still think I'm crazy, you can walk away. But at least consider it. Why me? Elena asked, needing to understand. Really? Not the philosophy about honesty or whatever. Why specifically me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gaze holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. Because you looked at me like I was boring you, not like I was dangerous. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Everyone else sees what I can do for them or to them. You just wanted me to shut up so you could read. Despite everything, Elena felt a laugh bubbling up. I was polite about it. Exactly. He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, offered it to her. My private number is on there. Think about it. You don't have to decide tonight. Elena took the cardstock heavy and expensive, between her fingers. This was insane. This was the plot of a ridiculous novel. This was an escape route. The thought slammed into her with physical force. For years, she'd been saving money in secret, planning some eventual future where she could leave the Whitmore house and build something of her own. But her savings account was pathetic. Her job prospects limited by a degree her parents had chosen for her in a field she didn't care about. She was trapped in amber, preserved perfectly in a life that felt like drowning. 12 months. That's what he was offering. 12 months of playing pretend in exchange for actual freedom at the end. If I agreed, she said slowly, theoretically, what would you tell people? About why you chose me over Victoria? The truth. That I wanted someone genuine instead of someone performing. He watched her carefully, like he was evaluating how she processed information. Your family will hate it. Society will have opinions. It won't be comfortable. Nothing about my life is comfortable. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Then you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Adrian moved toward the door, giving her space. Read the contract when I send it. If you have questions, call me. If you want out, burn the card, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened. He opened the door, paused with his hand on the frame. For what it's worth, Elena, I think you've been invisible long enough. Might be time to change that. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the library with a business card and a choice that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. The door opened again 30 seconds later, but this time it was Victoria, fury radiating from her like heat. What did he say to you? Nothing. Elena slipped the card into her pocket. He apologized for the scene. You're lying. Victoria moved closer, her perfect face twisted with something ugly. He asked to speak with you specifically. Adrian Volkov doesn't apologize, and he doesn't do anything without a reason. What did he want? Victoria, I don't. You did this. Her sister's voice climbed toward hysteria. You've always been jealous of me, always lurking in corners wishing you had what I have. And now you've somehow poisoned him against me. Elena felt exhausted suddenly, bone-deep tired of this script they'd been performing for years. I didn't do anything. I barely know the man. Then why did he want to talk to you? Why you instead of me? Victoria's hands clenched into fists. You're nobody, Elena. You're the invisible daughter, the one mother wishes didn't exist. You're supposed to stay quiet and out of the way. That's all you're good for. The words should have hurt. They'd hurt before, all the variations on this theme that Victoria had deployed over the years. But standing there with a business card in her pocket and the possibility of actual choice humming under her skin, Elena felt something shift. You're right, she said quietly. I've been invisible. Maybe I'm tired of it. She walked past her sister, out of the library, through the hallway where voices still argued in the dining room. She took the back stairs to her room, the smallest bedroom on the third floor that barely fit a bed and desk. The room they'd given her because she didn't need much space, and guests were more important. Elena sat on her bed and pulled out Adrian's card. Heavy cardstock, simple black text. A phone number she could call or never call. 12 months. Freedom. Outside her door, she heard her mother's voice raised in anger, her father's deeper tones trying to manage the crisis. The whole house felt like it was vibrating with the aftershocks of Adrian's announcement, with the social disaster that would need to be controlled, the narratives that would need to be crafted. None of it touched her. For the first time in years, Elena felt like she was standing apart from her family's chaos, watching it from a distance instead of being crushed by it. She thought about landscape architecture, about the book she'd been reading that night at the gala, about green spaces carved out of concrete jungles, places where beauty existed because someone had decided it mattered enough to fight for it. Maybe she could be her own green space. Maybe she could fight for herself. Elena picked up her phone and stared at the number on the card. She could call now, accept immediately, burn every bridge in her life before fear talked her out of it. Or she could wait for the contract, read the fine print, make a careful decision like a responsible adult. She'd been responsible her whole life. It had gotten her a room the size of a closet and a family who barely remembered she existed. Her finger hovered over the number. Then she set the phone down and opened her laptop instead. If she was going to do something this insane, she needed information. She needed to know exactly who Adrian Volkov was beyond the surface reputation, what she'd be walking into, what risks she couldn't afford to ignore. The research took 3 hours. By the end of it, Elena knew significantly more about the man who'd offered her an escape route, and none of it made her feel particularly safe. Adrian Volkov's business empire was built on calculated risks and strategic ruthlessness. People who crossed him tended to suffer consequences that were never quite provable but always devastating. He operated in legal gray areas with the confidence of someone who understood that law and justice weren't the same thing. He was dangerous. That wasn't reputation or rumor. It was documented fact, if you knew where to look. Elena should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to relief. Because dangerous meant powerful, and powerful meant he could actually deliver on the promises he'd made. If she was going to trade one cage for another, at least this one came with an exit date and a payout. At midnight, her phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize with a PDF attachment. The subject line read simply, "Contract for review." Elena downloaded the file and started reading. 27 pages. Dense legal language that required her to look up terms on every other paragraph. But the core terms were clear enough. 12 months from the date of legal marriage. Shared residence at his primary home, but separate bedrooms. Joint appearances at social and business functions as needed. Complete financial transparency on both sides. A compensation package that made Elena's hand shake when she reached the dollar amount. And termination clauses. Clear, explicit terms for ending the arrangement early if either party violated the agreement. No-fault exit options at the 6-month mark if both parties agreed. Ironclad non-disclosure agreements protecting both of them. It was the most romantic, unromantic document Elena had ever read. At the bottom, a note in plain text. My lawyer is available to answer questions. You can also hire your own attorney to review. Take whatever time you need. A V. Elena read the contract 3 more times, making notes, highlighting sections, trying to find the trap. Because there had to be a trap, didn't there? Nobody offered this kind of escape without expecting something in return. But the terms were surprisingly fair, surprisingly protective even. Almost like Adrian actually meant what he'd said about wanting an arrangement, not a victim. At 2 in the morning, Elena heard footsteps outside her door. A soft knock, then her mother's voice, controlled and cold. Elena, we need to talk. She didn't answer. After a minute, the footsteps retreated. They would come back. Tomorrow there would be family meetings, consequences, demands for explanations. Victoria would play the wounded victim. Her parents would deploy guilt and obligation like weapons. The whole machinery of family pressure would grind into motion, trying to push Elena back into her designated role. But for tonight, alone in her tiny room with a contract on her laptop screen, Elena had something they couldn't take from her yet. She had a choice. At dawn, Elena made coffee in the kitchen before anyone else woke up. She sat at the small breakfast nook overlooking the garden and watched light creep across manicured lawns that required a staff of 3 to maintain. Her father's status symbols, her mother's proof of success. None of it meant anything to her. She pulled out her phone and typed a text to the number on Adrian's card. I have questions about the contract. When can we talk? The response came 30 seconds later. My office, 2 p.m. today, address below. Elena finished her coffee and went upstairs to her room. She packed a bag, not everything, just essentials and a few items that actually mattered to her. The photograph of her grandmother, who died when Elena was 12 and had been the last person to treat her like she was worth attention. A few books, her laptop, clothes that her mother hadn't picked out. She didn't know if she'd need the bag, but having it ready felt important. At 8, her mother knocked again, more insistent this time. Elena Whitmore, open this door, right now. Elena opened it. Catherine stood in the hallway fully dressed and made up despite the early hour, armor in place. We need to discuss what happened last night. There's nothing to discuss. Adrian ended his engagement to Victoria. It has nothing to do with me. Don't play stupid. It doesn't suit you. Catherine pushed past her into the room, noticed the bag on the bed. What is that? Nothing. You're not going anywhere. Her mother's eyes went cold. Whatever nonsense is in your head, whatever fantasy you've constructed about last night, you need to stop. Our family is in crisis because of that man's behavior, and you will not make it worse by doing something foolish. I'm 24 years old. I can do what I want. You're 24 years old with no money, no prospects, and no idea how the real world works. Catherine sat on the bed like she owned it, which technically she did. You think you're trapped here? Try surviving out there on your own. See how long your pride lasts when you can't pay rent. It was a trap Elena had felt closing around her for years. The practical reality that freedom required resources she didn't have. Her job barely paid enough to cover her personal expenses, let alone an apartment in the city. Her degree was useless. Her experience limited to positions her father had arranged with business associates. But that was before a contract offering enough money to change everything. I'll be fine, Elena said, knowing it sounded weak. You'll be a disaster and you'll come crawling back here begging for help. Catherine stood, smoothed her skirt. Whatever Adrian Volkov said to you in that library, forget it. He's playing some kind of game and you're not sophisticated enough to understand the rules. Stay away from him. That's not a request. After her mother left, Elena sat on her bed staring at her packed bag and feeling the weight of her life pressing down like gravity had suddenly increased. Maybe Catherine was right. Maybe she was being stupid, risking everything on the word of a dangerous man she barely knew. But staying meant accepting that this was all her life would ever be. This room, this family, this slow suffocation. At 1:30, Elena got dressed in her most professional outfit, a navy dress that Victoria had discarded for being too boring, and left the house. No announcement, no permission. She just walked out, bag in hand, and caught a car to the address Adrian had provided. His office was in one of those buildings that suggested money by being aggressively understated, glass and steel, but not showy about it. The lobby was all clean lines and expensive silence. The security guard checked her name against a list and directed her to a private elevator. She rode up alone, watching the city shrink below her through the glass wall. 40 stories up, the elevator opened into a reception area where a woman in her 30s greeted Elena by name and led her to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Adrian was standing by the windows when she entered, phone to his ear, finishing a conversation in what sounded like Russian. He ended the call when he saw her and gestured to the table where copies of the contract sat next to bottles of water and a legal pad. "You came," he said, like he'd genuinely wondered if she would. "I have questions." Elena set her bag down, trying to project confidence. "A lot of them." "Good. That means you actually read it." He sat across from her, close enough to talk comfortably, but far enough to not feel crowding. "Ask whatever you need." Elena pulled out her notes. Clause 7, subsection 3. It says I'm required to attend necessary social functions, but doesn't define what that means. How many are we talking? What kind of events? For the next hour, they went through the contract line by line. Adrian answered every question without evasion, explained clauses she didn't understand, and agreed to modifications when she pushed back on terms that felt too vague. He pulled in his lawyer via video conference to clarify legal language, and when Elena said she wanted her own attorney to review, he offered to pay for it. By the time they finished, Elena had filled 12 pages with notes, and her head was spinning. "Last question," she said. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's because we had a nice conversation about parks. Nobody constructs a 12-month contract marriage over 20 minutes of small talk." Adrian was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and walked back to the windows, looking out at the city spread below them. "I built everything I have by being strategic," he said finally. "Every relationship, every alliance, every decision calculated for maximum benefit. It's efficient. It works. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to talk to someone who wasn't calculating back." He turned to face her. "You didn't want anything from me. You weren't trying to impress me or manipulate me or position yourself for advantage. You were just there, being honest about being bored. It was the most refreshing interaction I've had in years. And yes, that's pathetic. But it's also true." Elena studied him, trying to see past the careful control to whatever was underneath. "You're lonely." "Probably. But lonely with resources is better than lonely without them." He moved back to the table, picked up one of the contract copies. "This is a business arrangement, Elena. I'm not offering you romance or rescue, but I am offering you a way out of a life that's suffocating you. I saw your face last night at that dinner table. You looked like you were drowning." "I was." "So take the life raft. 12 months. We both get what we need, and then we walk away. Clean, simple, mutually beneficial." Nothing about this was simple, but Elena was tired of pretending her life was sustainable the way it was. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "my family will lose their minds. It'll be a disaster. Yes. Victoria will never forgive me. Probably not. Everyone will think I'm insane or that you're using me somehow." Without question. Adrian sat back down, meeting her eyes directly. "It will be uncomfortable and complicated, and nothing like the life you have now. But you'll survive it, and when it's done, you'll have enough money to build whatever comes next. That's the trade." Elena looked at the contract, at the bag she'd brought with her essentials, at the man offering her an escape route paved with complications. She thought about her tiny room in the house where nobody saw her, about Victoria's perfect smile and her mother's cold control, about spending the rest of her life being invisible. "I want one modification to the contract," she said. "What?" "Clause 17, the termination section. I want it to specify that if either of us develops actual romantic feelings, we can terminate immediately without penalty. No 6-month waiting period." Adrian's expression shifted, something like surprise crossing his face. "You think that's a risk?" "I think it's smart to plan for every contingency." Elena met his gaze steadily. "This only works if we're both clear about what it is. The second it becomes something else, it's done. Agreed?" He considered for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed. I'll have my lawyer add the clause. Then I'll need 24 hours to have my own attorney review the final version." Elena stood, suddenly needing to move, to prove to herself she could still walk away if she wanted. "If everything checks out, I'll sign. And if it doesn't? Then we both forget this conversation happened." She picked up her bag, surprised by how steady her hands were. "Either way, you'll have an answer by Friday." Adrian stood as well, offering his hand formally. "Friday, then." Elena shook it, his grip firm, but not overwhelming. For a moment they just stood there, two people contemplating a future that made no sense but somehow felt inevitable anyway. "Can I ask you something?" she said before leaving. "Of course." "Why didn't you just tell Victoria the truth from the beginning? That you weren't interested?" Adrian's smile was brief and humorless. "Because she never asked what I wanted. She asked what I could give her. There's a difference." Elena left the office building and stood on the sidewalk in the afternoon sun, her bag over her shoulder, her phone buzzing with texts from her mother that she didn't read. The city moved around her with indifferent energy, millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with hers. She felt terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. By Friday, she would have to choose. Keep drowning in a life that was killing her slowly, or jump into deep water with a stranger who promised her the chance to learn how to swim. Elena started walking, no particular destination in mind, just needing to move. And somewhere between the office building and wherever she ended up, she realized she'd already made her choice. She'd made it the moment she packed that bag. The attorney Elena hired charged $300 an hour and was worth every penny. Martha Castellano had gray hair pulled into a bun that looked like it could cut glass, reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every variation of human stupidity the legal system had to offer. "This is either the smartest thing you've ever done or the dumbest," Martha said, setting down the contract after 2 hours of review. "I haven't decided which yet." Elena sat across from her in an office that smelled like old books and expensive coffee. "That's not exactly reassuring." "It's not meant to be. You're marrying a man you barely know for financial compensation with a built-in expiration date. Nothing about this should feel reassuring." Martha flipped back to a section she'd marked with a yellow tab. "That said, the contract itself is surprisingly solid. Whoever drafted this actually tried to protect both parties, which is rare. Usually these arrangements are designed to screw someone over. So you think I should sign it? I think you should understand what you're signing." Martha pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "The compensation structure is aggressive but fair. The termination clauses give you multiple exit options if things go wrong. The non-disclosure agreements protect you as much as they protect him. But Elena, this is still a massive risk. You're legally binding yourself to a man with a reputation for being ruthless in business. If he decides to violate the terms, you'll have legal recourse. But legal recourse doesn't undo damage." Elena had spent 3 days thinking about nothing else. 3 days of avoiding her family's increasingly frantic calls, sleeping on her friend Maya's couch, and trying to imagine a future that didn't make her want to scream. "What would you do if you were me?" Martha smiled, thin and knowing. "I'd ask myself what I was running from and what I was running toward. If the answer to the first question is bigger than the answer to the second, you're making a mistake. But if you're running toward something that matters more than what you're leaving behind, then maybe it's worth the risk." "That's very philosophical for a lawyer." "I contain multitudes." Martha pushed the contract across the desk. "My professional opinion is that this document is legally sound, and the terms are as favorable as you're likely to get in this type of arrangement. My personal opinion is that you look more alive talking about this insane plan than you probably have in years. Make of that what you will. Elena signed the contract that afternoon in Martha's office, her signature looking smaller than usual on the designated line. Martha witnessed it, made copies, and promised to file the necessary paperwork. The whole process took 20 minutes and changed everything. One more thing, Martha said as Elena was leaving. The prenuptial clause about romantic feelings terminating the contract. That was smart. But be careful with it. Sometimes the line between performing a role and actually feeling something gets blurry. Don't lie to yourself about which side you're on. The warning sat heavy in Elena's stomach as she took the car back to Maya's apartment. Her phone had 17 missed calls from her mother, 9 from Victoria, and 1 from her father that she suspected involved threats. She ignored all of them and sent a single text to Adrian's number. Contract signed. What happens next? His response came immediately. We make it legal. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., City Hall. Bring identification and the signed contract. I'll handle the rest. Elena stared at the message. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours from now, she'd be married to a man she'd spoken to exactly twice in her life. The absurdity of it should have sent her running. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to relief. Maya found her sitting on the tiny balcony of the apartment, watching traffic move through the streets below. You look like you're about to either throw up or jump. Please don't do either. I signed it. Elena showed her the phone. We're getting married tomorrow. Jesus. Maya sat down hard on the other plastic chair, which creaked ominously. Okay, we're doing this. Do you have something to wear? You can't get married in jeans. It's just a legal formality. It's not like it's a real wedding. It's real enough to be binding. You're wearing something decent. Maya stood with the determination of someone who decided to solve a problem through action. Come on, we're going shopping. Maya, I don't have money for my treat. Consider it a wedding present for the most insane decision you've ever made. She pulled Elena to her feet. Besides, if you're doing this, you're doing it right. You walk into that city hall looking like you chose this, not like you're being led to execution. They found a dress in a small boutique that Maya knew about. Cream-colored and simple but well-cut enough to look intentional. The saleswoman asked if it was for a special occasion, and Maya said courthouse wedding, with enough enthusiasm that the woman offered them champagne neither of them drank. Back at the apartment, Elena tried on the dress again and looked at herself in Maya's full-length mirror. She looked like someone playing dress-up in someone else's life. Or maybe she looked like someone who was finally stepping into a life that fit. You're sure about this? Maya asked, watching her from the doorway. Because you can still back out. You can stay here, find a job, build something different. You don't have to marry a stranger to escape your family. I'm not just escaping them, I'm buying time to figure out who I am without them. Elena turned away from the mirror. 12 months, that's all this is. 12 months of space to breathe and enough money at the end to actually start over. And if it goes wrong, then at least I'll have tried something instead of suffocating quietly in that house for the rest of my life. Elena sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. I'm tired of being invisible, Maya. I'm tired of being the daughter nobody wanted, the sister everyone forgot about. Maybe this is stupid, but it's mine. I'm choosing it. That has to count for something. Maya sat beside her, shoulder to shoulder, in the way they'd been since college, when Elena had been the quiet roommate, and Maya had been the extrovert who'd decided they were friends whether Elena liked it or not. It counts, and I've got your back, whatever happens, but please, for the love of everything, be careful. This Adrian guy might seem reasonable now, but power makes people weird. Don't forget that. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay on Maya's couch, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the ways this could destroy her. By dawn, she'd cataloged at least 30 catastrophic outcomes and still couldn't make herself regret the decision. At 9, she got dressed in the cream dress and shoes Maya had insisted she buy. She did her makeup carefully, trying to look like someone who knew what they were doing. The result was somewhere between competent adult and terrified imposter, but it would have to do. Adrian texted at 9:30. Car's outside whenever you're ready. Elena grabbed her bag, hugged Maya hard enough to crack ribs, and walked down to the street where a sleek black car waited. The driver opened the door without comment, and she slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. The drive to City Hall took 15 minutes through morning traffic. Elena watched the city pass by the tinted windows and tried to convince herself this was real, that she was actually doing this, that in less than an hour she'd be legally married to Adrian Volkov. He was waiting on the steps when she arrived, dressed in a dark suit that made him look even more intimidating than usual. But when he saw her get out of the car, something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something softer than his usual controlled neutrality. "You look nice," he said, which was possibly the most generic compliment in existence, but somehow felt genuine. "Thanks. You too." Elena climbed the steps to stand beside him, clutching her bag like a lifeline. "I'm completely terrified." "Good. That means you're paying attention." He gestured toward the entrance. "We have an appointment with a clerk in 10 minutes. It'll be quick. Basic vows, signatures, legal documentation. Then we're done." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He started walking and she followed through security and down hallways that smelled like government buildings everywhere, cleaning products and old paper and bureaucratic indifference. The clerk was a woman in her 50s who'd clearly processed so many marriages that romance had been completely drained from the concept. She checked their identification, verified their documents, and led them into a small room with fluorescent lighting and motivational posters about civic duty. "Do you have rings?" she asked, sounding like she already knew the answer. "No," Adrian said. "That's fine. You can exchange them later if you want." She pulled out a laminated card with text on it. "This is the standard ceremony, takes about 5 minutes. If you want to add personal vows or anything special, now's the time to say so." Elena looked at Adrian. He looked back. Neither of them said anything. "Standard it is." The clerk positioned them facing each other and started reading in a monotone that suggested she'd done this 10,000 times and would do it 10,000 more. "We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in matrimony." Elena barely heard the words. She was too busy trying to process the surreal reality of standing in a government office with terrible lighting, marrying a man she'd had exactly 3 conversations with, burning down her entire life for a chance at something different. "Do you, Adrian Volkov, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the clerk asked. "I do." His voice was steady, unremarkable, like he was confirming a business transaction. "Do you, Elena Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" This was it. Last chance to run, to say no, to choose safety over risk. Elena could feel her heartbeat in her throat, could hear Maya's warning about power making people weird, could imagine her mother's face if she ever found out about this. "I do," she said, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff. The clerk produced a document that needed signatures. Elena signed her name next to Adrian's, their handwriting looking strange together on the page. His bold and aggressive, hers smaller and more careful. The clerk witnessed it, stamped it, and handed them both copies. "Congratulations, you're legally married. Next appointment is in 5 minutes, so if you could—" They left before she finished the sentence, walking back through the hallways in silence. Elena clutched her copy of the marriage certificate and tried to make sense of what had just happened. She was married. Legally, officially married to Adrian Volkov. The most ridiculous, impulsive, terrifying thing she'd ever done, completed in less time than it took to order coffee. Outside on the steps, Adrian turned to her. "There's a car waiting to take you to the house. My assistant will meet you there to help you get settled. I have a meeting at noon that I can't move, but I'll be back this evening and we can discuss logistics." "Wait, what?" Elena blinked. "You're not coming with me?" "I told you, I have a meeting. Marcus will take care of everything you need." He was already pulling out his phone, scrolling through what looked like a calendar packed with obligations. "The house staff knows you're arriving. Your room is ready. If you need anything, ask Marcus." He started down the steps toward a different car, leaving Elena standing there holding a marriage certificate and feeling like she'd just been processed through some kind of efficient transaction system. "Adrian," she called after him. He turned back, one hand on the car door. "This is really weird," she said. "Yes." He almost smiled. "But we agreed to weird. See you tonight." Then he was gone, the car pulling away into traffic, and Elena was left with a driver named Marcus who looked like he could bench press a truck and had the emotional expressiveness of a rock. "Mrs. Volkov," Marcus said, opening the passenger door of the other car. "If you're ready." Mrs. Volkov. The name hit her like cold water. That was her now, at least legally. Elena Volkov. She'd been Elena Whitmore for 24 years, and in the space of 5 minutes with terrible lighting, that identity had been overwritten. The drive to Adrian's house took 40 minutes, leaving the city center and heading into the kind of neighborhood where the properties had names instead of addresses. They turned onto a private road that wound through manicured grounds, and then the house came into view. A modern construction of glass and stone that managed to look both imposing and somehow understated. Mr. Volkov designed it himself, Marcus offered, the first voluntary information he'd provided. Worked with architects for 2 years to get it right. Elena stared at the building. It looked like the kind of place that belonged in architecture magazines, all clean lines and expensive materials. Nothing like the Whitmore house with its desperate attempt at old money aesthetics. This was new money that didn't apologize for itself. Marcus parked in a circular driveway where a woman in her 60s waited by the front entrance. She had steel gray hair and a practical cut, and the kind of face that suggested she'd managed households for powerful people and wasn't impressed by much. Mrs. Volkov, the woman said as Elena got out of the car. I'm Sarah Chen, the house manager. Welcome. I'll show you to your quarters and explain how things work here. Elena followed her inside, her shoes clicking on floors that looked like polished concrete. The interior was minimalist but not cold. High ceilings, carefully chosen furniture, art that actually meant something instead of just filling space. It felt like a place someone actually lived, not a showroom. The main living areas are on this floor, Sarah explained, leading her through rooms that flowed into each other with architectural intention. Kitchen, dining room, library, Adrian's office, which is off-limits unless he invites you in. The second floor has the bedrooms. Yours is on the east side, his is on the west. You each have your own bathroom and sitting room. There's a gym in the basement, a pool out back, and the gardens if you want privacy. They climbed a floating staircase to the second floor, where Sarah opened a door into what she'd called Elena's quarters. The room was easily 3 times the size of her bedroom at the Whitmore house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens and furniture that looked both expensive and comfortable. The bathroom was all marble and glass. The closet was bigger than some apartments, and there was a sitting room with a desk and bookshelves that made Elena's chest tight with something like longing. Your things from Miss Rivera's apartment are being delivered this afternoon, Sarah said. But Mr. Volkov asked me to make sure you had everything you needed immediately. There's clothing in the closet in your size, basics to start. You can shop for more when you're settled. Toiletries in the bathroom. If anything's wrong, tell me and I'll fix it. Elena walked to the window and looked out at gardens that someone clearly spent a fortune maintaining. This is surreal. Yes, I imagine it is. Sarah's tone was dry, but not unkind. Mr. Volkov explained your arrangement. I've worked for him for 8 years, and I can tell you he's demanding, but fair. Follow the household rules, respect his privacy, and you'll be fine. What are the household rules? Don't go in his office without permission. Don't discuss his business with anyone outside this house. Don't make commitments or promises on his behalf. Keep your quarters as you like, but respect the common spaces. Dinner is at 7 when he's home, but you're not required to eat together unless there's a social function. The staff includes myself, Marcus, who you met, a chef, a housekeeper, and a gardener. We're all discreet and we're all loyal to Adrian. Questions? Elena had about 1,000 questions, but most of them weren't the kind Sarah could answer. When will I meet the rest of the staff? They'll introduce themselves as needed. We're here to make your life easier, not to intrude. Sarah moved toward the door. I'll leave you to settle in. If you need anything, there's an intercom system. Press the button by the door and someone will respond. Dinner's at 7 if you'd like to join Adrian, or I can have something sent to your room. After Sarah left, Elena sat on the edge of the bed and tried to process the fact that this was her life now. This room, this house, this arrangement with a man she'd married in a government office with fluorescent lighting. Her phone buzzed. 17 new messages, all from her family. She'd been ignoring them for days, but they were getting more frantic. The most recent was from her father. Elena, this has gone on long enough. Come home immediately, and we'll discuss your behavior like adults. Her behavior, like she was a misbehaving child instead of a grown woman who'd made a choice. She opened a text window to her mother and typed, I'm not coming home. I'm married. Don't contact me again. She sent it before she could talk herself out of it, then turned off her phone and threw it in a drawer. The afternoon stretched out in strange silence. Elena unpacked the few things Marcus delivered from Maya's apartment, explored her new quarters, and tried to make sense of the luxury she was apparently supposed to just accept as normal now. The closet did have clothes in her size. Casual pieces, nothing fancy, but all good quality. The bathroom had products she actually liked, which meant someone had done research. It felt invasive and thoughtful in equal measure. At 6:30, she stood in her closet trying to decide what to wear to dinner with her new husband. Everything felt wrong. Too casual, too formal, too trying too hard. She finally settled on dark jeans and a sweater that made her look approximately normal, then walked downstairs feeling like an intruder in someone else's house. Adrian was in the kitchen talking to a man in chef's whites about something involving seasonal vegetables. He looked up when Elena entered, still in the suit from earlier, but with his tie gone and sleeves rolled up. Somehow the casual version was more unsettling than the fully armored business persona. "You found your way around," he said, which wasn't really a question. "Sarah's very efficient." Elena hovered in the doorway, not sure where she was supposed to be or what she was supposed to do. "Is there anything I should—" "Sit, eat. Stop looking like you're waiting for permission to exist." He gestured to the dining table, which was set for two with food already arranged on serving platters. "Thomas made salmon. He's been with me for 5 years and takes it personally when people don't appreciate his cooking, so at least pretend to enjoy it." The chef, Thomas, apparently, smiled and disappeared back into the kitchen. Elena sat at the table, and Adrian served food onto her plate before dealing with his own. The whole thing felt aggressively domestic in a way that made her skin itch. "How was your afternoon?" Adrian asked, cutting into his salmon with surgical precision. "Weird, disorienting. I turned off my phone because my family won't stop calling." Elena pushed food around her plate. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Boring. The usual." He ate like someone who'd learned efficiency mattered more than enjoyment. "Your family will escalate. They'll show up here eventually, or they'll try to contact you through other channels. When they do, you decide how to handle it. I won't interfere unless you ask me to. They're going to lose their minds when they find out I married you." "They already lost their minds when I ended the engagement with Victoria. This is just the second act." Adrian set down his fork and looked at her directly. "You need to understand something, Elena. Your family will use every weapon they have: guilt, obligation, money, social pressure. They'll tell you I'm manipulating you, that you've made a mistake, that you're ruining your life, that they might even be right about some of it. But you signed a contract that gives you options. Don't let them make you forget that." Elena took a bite of salmon, which was actually incredible, but she could barely taste it. "Why are you being nice about this? You could just tell me to deal with it myself." "I could, but we're in this together for the next 12 months, and it's easier if you're not miserable." He went back to eating. "Besides, I have experience with families that function like businesses. I know how they operate." "Is that what your family was like?" Adrian's expression shuddered. "My family isn't a subject I discuss. That's in the contract, Section 12. Elena blinked, caught off guard by the sudden coldness. "Right, sorry." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The earlier ease completely evaporated. Elena was trying to figure out how to restart conversation when Adrian spoke again. "There's a charity gala next Friday. Black tie. Lots of people who matter for business reasons. It'll be our first public appearance as a married couple." He said it like he was scheduling a dental appointment. "I'll need you there, looking appropriately content. Can you manage that?" "I can pretend to be content for a few hours. Yes." "Good. My assistant will coordinate details with you. Dress, schedule, background on who you'll meet. These events are tedious but necessary. Try not to look too bored." "I'll do my best not to embarrass you," Elena said, letting some edge into her voice. Adrian looked up sharply. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it? You needed someone who can play the role convincingly. That's what you hired me for." "I didn't hire you. We made an arrangement." He set down his fork with controlled precision. "And I don't think you'll embarrass me. I think you'll be better at this than you believe you are. But you need to stop looking for insults that aren't there." Elena felt her face heat. "You're right. Sorry. This is just..." It's a lot. It is. His voice softened fractionally. But you knew it would be. First day is always the hardest. They finished dinner with sporadic conversation about neutral topics: the house, the neighborhood, logistics of shared space. It felt like two strangers trying to figure out how to exist in the same room, which was exactly what they were. After dinner, Elena retreated to her quarters and called Maya from the house phone since her cell was still off. So? Maya demanded immediately. Are you alive? Are you imprisoned? Do I need to call someone? I'm fine. The house is insane, the staff is efficient, and I had dinner with my husband who I barely know, and it was supremely awkward. Elena flopped onto her bed, staring at the ceiling. This is so weird, Maya. Weird but survivable? So far. Ask me again in a week when I have to pretend to be a happy wife at some society gala. You'll be great. Just channel Victoria for the performance parts. That's terrible advice and also probably accurate. Elena laughed despite herself. I miss normal life already. Normal life was killing you. This might be weird, but at least it's different. Maya paused. Call me every day, okay? I need to know you're actually fine and not just saying it. After hanging up, Elena lay in the unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar room and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Tomorrow she'd start figuring out how to actually live in this arrangement instead of just surviving it. Tomorrow she'd be braver, more confident, more certain this was survivable. Tonight she just felt small and scared and very far from anything that felt like home. She must have fallen asleep eventually because she woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to cover and the disorienting realization that everything from yesterday had actually happened. She was married. She lived in Adrian Volkov's house. Her old life was gone, traded for this strange new reality. Her phone, which she'd turned back on at some point in the night, showed 43 missed calls and 62 text messages. Most were from her family, escalating from confused to angry to threatening. But 3 were from Victoria, and those she made herself read. The first, how could you do this to me? The second, everyone knows you married him. You're a joke, a pathetic replacement. The third, I hope you're happy destroying this family. You were always jealous, and now you've proven it. Elena deleted them all and blocked the number. She couldn't handle Victoria's rage on top of everything else. A knock on her door made her jump. Come in? Sarah entered with a tray, coffee, fruit, pastries that smelled incredible. Mr. Volkov asked me to let you know he's in meetings all day, but he'll be home for dinner. His assistant Claire will call you at 10 to discuss the gala preparations. Is there anything you need? Actually, yes. Is there a car I can use? I need to get out of the house for a few hours. Sarah nodded. Marcus can drive you anywhere you'd like. Just let him know when you're ready. Elena spent the morning in a coffee shop with her laptop, researching Adrian more thoroughly now that she was legally tied to him. The business empire was even more complex than she'd realized. Real estate development, venture capital, strategic investments in technology companies. He sat on 3 corporate boards, chaired 2 charity foundations, and had a reputation for being brilliant and utterly ruthless in negotiations. There were photos from various events, always with beautiful women on his arm who looked decorative and forgettable. Never the same woman twice. No serious relationships mentioned anywhere. It was like he'd systematically avoided anything that looked like actual emotional connection, which made sense, given what he'd told her about calculating every relationship. But it was still depressing. Claire called at 10 exactly, her voice crisp and efficient. Mrs. Volkov, I'm Adrian's assistant. I'll be coordinating your schedule for public events. For the Gala Friday, we need to discuss your dress, hair, and makeup appointments and briefing materials on the attendees. Briefing materials? Background on who you'll meet, what they do, why they matter to Adrian's business interests. It helps to know who you're talking to. Claire made it sound completely normal. I'm sending a stylist to the house tomorrow at 2. She'll bring dress options and accessories, pick whatever you're comfortable in. Adrian doesn't care about the details, he just needs you to look appropriate. That's very organized. It's my job. Claire's tone suggested she was very good at her job. I'll email you the briefing materials tonight. Read them before Friday. Any questions? Elena had a million questions, but none Claire could probably answer. No, I'm good. Excellent. I'll be in touch. The call ended, leaving Elena sitting in the coffee shop feeling like she'd just been efficiently processed through another system. Everything in Adrian's world seemed to operate like this, smooth, organized, designed for maximum efficiency. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made her feel like a component in a machine, replaceable and impersonal. She spent the afternoon walking through the city, just existing in public space without purpose or destination. It felt like freedom in miniature. No one knew where she was. No one was demanding her presence. No one cared what she did with her time. For a few hours, she was just another person in the crowd. When she got back to the house around 5, there was a package waiting in her room. Inside was a credit card with her new name on it and a note in precise handwriting. For whatever you need, no limit, no questions, A. Elena stared at the card. No limit. Just like that, she had access to more money than she'd ever imagined having. The power of it felt almost obscene. She put the card in her wallet and tried not to think too hard about what it meant that her husband was wealthy enough to give her unlimited access to his accounts without worrying about consequences. Dinner that night was quieter. Adrian looked exhausted, and Elena wasn't much better. They ate pasta that Thomas had made and talked about nothing important. It should have been uncomfortable, but somehow the tiredness made it easier. They were both just too drained to perform. "How was your first full day as Mrs. Volkov?" Adrian asked, pouring wine she wasn't sure she should drink, but accepted anyway. "Surreal. I bought coffee with your credit card and felt like a criminal." Elena took a sip of wine that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget used to. "Claire called about the gala. She's very efficient. She's the only reason my life functions. I'd be buried in logistics without her." He leaned back in his chair, some of the corporate armor visibly falling away. "You'll do fine at the gala. Just stay near me, smile at the right moments, and let me handle the actual politics." "That's it? Just smile and look content?" "That's it. I'm not asking you to perform miracles, Elena, just to show up and not look miserable." He studied her for a moment. "Unless you think that's too much to ask?" "No, I can handle it." Elena set down her wine glass. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why don't you have friends? Everyone I researched, every article about you, it's always business associates or strategic connections, but no one who seems to actually know you." Adrian was quiet for long enough that Elena thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because friendship requires trust, and trust is a liability I can't afford." "That's incredibly lonely." "Yes, but loneliness is predictable. People aren't." He stood, collecting dishes, even though the staff would have done it. "I learned a long time ago that caring about people gives them power to hurt you. It's easier not to care." "Is that what you think this is?" Elena gestured between them. "An arrangement where neither of us cares?" "Isn't it?" She didn't have an answer to that. They cleaned up in silence, moving around each other like dancers who'd learned the steps but not the music. When they were done, Adrian headed toward his office, and Elena went upstairs to her room. Lying in bed that night, Elena thought about trust and loneliness and what it meant to build a life with someone while keeping them at arm's length. She'd agreed to 12 months of exactly that: controlled distance, clear boundaries, no emotional entanglement. But Martha's warning echoed in her head. Sometimes the line between performing a role and actually feeling something gets blurry. She fell asleep wondering which side of that line she was on and whether it would matter by the time she figured it out. The stylist arrived exactly at 2 with enough garment bags to outfit a small wedding party. Her name was Simone, and she had the kind of effortless elegance that made Elena feel underdressed in her own house. "Claire sent your measurements and some notes about the event," Simone said, laying out dresses across Elena's bed with the precision of someone arranging surgical instruments. "Black-tie charity gala, conservative crowd, but not boring. You need to look like you belong there without trying too hard. Let's see what works." Elena tried on 7 dresses before Simone made a satisfied noise at number 8, a deep emerald silk that somehow managed to look expensive without being flashy. It fit perfectly, which should have been gratifying but mostly felt invasive. Someone had known her exact measurements without asking. "This one," Simone declared. "It's sophisticated, it photographs well, and the color works with your skin tone. Adrian will approve." "Does he usually approve your choices?" Elena asked, studying herself in the mirror. "Adrian doesn't care about fashion. He cares about people looking appropriate for the context." Simone pulled out a jewelry case. These are on loan from a friend who owes me favors. Simple emerald earrings, nothing that competes with the dress. You're not trying to be the most memorable person in the room. You're trying to be appropriately invisible while standing next to him. The phrasing hit harder than Simone probably intended. Appropriately invisible. Elena had spent her whole life mastering that particular skill, and now she was being paid to deploy it professionally. After Simone left with the rejected dresses and a promise to send shoes, Elena found the briefing materials Claire had emailed. 43 pages of background on people who would be at the gala. Who they were, what they did, how they connected to Adrian's interests, what topics to avoid. It read like intelligence files, which was probably intentional. She was halfway through memorizing details about a real estate developer named Marcus Chen when Adrian appeared in her doorway, still in a suit from whatever meeting had consumed his afternoon. "Simone found something that works?" he asked. "Apparently. She said you'd approve, which I'm trying not to overthink." Elena closed her laptop. "Do you always have your assistant send 40-page briefings about party guests?" "Only for events where the conversations matter." He leaned against the door frame, looking tired in a way that made him seem almost human. "Did you read the section on Senator Morrison? The one who's blocking your development project in the financial district?" "Yes." "His wife will be there, Caroline Morrison. She's the actual power in that relationship, and she likes landscape architecture." Adrian's expression shifted into something calculating. If you can get her talking about urban green spaces, she might soften her position on the project, or at least stop actively campaigning against it. Elena stared at him. "You want me to manipulate a senator's wife using my knowledge of parks? I want you to have an authentic conversation about something you're genuinely interested in. If it happens to benefit my business interests, that's just efficient." He said it like it was completely reasonable. "You don't have to if you're uncomfortable, but you're better equipped to talk to Caroline Morrison than I am. Because she likes plants, and I'm female? Because she's tired of people trying to impress her with political maneuvering, and you actually care about the subject instead of using it as a tool." Adrian pushed off the doorframe. "But like I said, your choice. I won't force you to work angles you're not comfortable with." After he left, Elena sat with the wrongness of it. He was asking her to use genuine interest as a manipulation tactic, which was somehow more disturbing than if he'd just asked her to lie. But he'd also given her the option to refuse, which suggested boundaries she hadn't expected. She went back to the briefing materials and read the section on Caroline Morrison more carefully. The woman had a master's degree in environmental policy, sat on 3 conservation boards, and had successfully blocked 2 major development projects for environmental reasons. She wasn't someone who could be easily charmed or manipulated, which meant Adrian was either testing Elena's abilities or genuinely believed a real conversation might achieve what political pressure couldn't. She wasn't sure which possibility was more unsettling. The next 3 days developed a rhythm that felt almost normal if Elena didn't think about it too hard. Adrian left early for meetings, came home for dinner most nights, and they'd eat while discussing neutral topics that required no emotional investment. He asked about her day like it was a box to check. She asked about his work, and he gave her edited summaries that revealed nothing important. They were 2 people sharing space efficiently, nothing more. Except sometimes Elena would catch him watching her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his expression unreadable. And sometimes she'd find herself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, tracking his presence in the house without meaning to. The line between performance and reality was getting blurry exactly the way Martha had warned, and Elena wasn't sure what to do about it. Friday arrived with the weight of an execution date. Elena spent the morning trying not to panic about the evening ahead, then gave up and called Maya for a pep talk. "You're going to be fine," Maya said with the confidence of someone who wouldn't be there. "You're smart, you're prepared, and you look amazing in that dress based on the photo you sent. Just remember, you belong there as much as anyone else." "I absolutely don't belong there. You're married to Adrian Volkov. That makes you exactly as legitimate as every other society wife in the room." Maya paused. "Okay, that sounded more empowering in my head. But you know what I mean. Don't let them make you feel small." The hair and makeup team arrived at 4. 2 women who transformed Elena's face into something camera-ready while discussing the guest list like they were planning military strategy. By 6, she looked like a polished version of herself, recognizable but elevated, which was apparently the goal. Adrian knocked on her door at 6:30, already dressed in a tuxedo that probably cost more than a used car. He stopped when he saw her, something flickering across his expression too quickly to identify. "You look good," he said, which was such an understatement, it almost made Elena laugh. Simone and a team of professionals deserve the credit. She picked up the small clutch that matched her dress. "Ready to go perform for important people?" "As ready as I ever am." He offered his arm with the formality of someone who'd learned proper etiquette and found it tedious. "Remember, you don't have to impress anyone. Just be present, and don't look miserable. Everything else is optional." The gala was being held at one of those historic mansions that rich people rented for events to suggest they had old money. The driveway was clogged with expensive cars, and photographers lined the entrance waiting for photo opportunities. Adrian kept his hand on the small of Elena's back as they walked the gauntlet, his touch light but proprietary. "Smile," he murmured as cameras flashed. "This is the easy part." Inside, the mansion was exactly what Elena expected. Crystal chandeliers, classical music played by an actual string quartet, waiters circulating with champagne and appetizers that cost more than they should. People glittered in designer clothes and jewelry that could fund small countries, all performing wealth and importance with practiced ease. "Adrian, finally!" A woman in her 50s materialized beside them, kissing Adrian on both cheeks with the confidence of someone who'd known him forever. "And you must be the mysterious bride everyone's been whispering about." "Catherine Hayes, Elena Volkov," Adrian said smoothly. "Catherine runs the foundation we're here to support tonight." "Lovely to meet you." Catherine's smile was warm, but her eyes were assessing. "I have to say, when I heard Adrian had gotten married, I nearly fell over. He's been avoiding commitment for as long as I've known him." "Sometimes the right person changes your perspective," Elena said, the lie coming easier than expected. "Clearly." Catherine's gaze moved between them like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "Well, welcome to the circus. These events are tedious but necessary. At least the wine is good." She floated away to greet other guests, and Adrian leaned close enough that Elena could smell his cologne. "Well done." Catherine's approval matters. "I'm not sure she approved. She looks suspicious." "She's always suspicious. That's why she's good at her job." He snagged 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, handed one to Elena. "See the couple by the fireplace? That's Senator Morrison and his wife Caroline. When there's an opening, I'll introduce you." Elena sipped champagne and tried to quiet the anxiety climbing her throat. She'd spent 3 days memorizing information about these people, preparing for conversations that mattered for reasons she barely understood. It felt like preparing for an exam in a subject she'd never studied. The next hour was a blur of introductions and small talk. Adrian moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, making connections and managing relationships with the same strategic precision he probably applied to business deals. Elena played her role, smiled at appropriate moments, made neutral comments about the venue and the cause, and tried not to look as out of place as she felt. Then Adrian guided her toward the Morrisons with the subtle pressure of his hand on her back. "Senator, Mrs. Morrison, good to see you both," Adrian said with exactly the right amount of warmth, friendly but not familiar. "I wanted to introduce my wife, Elena." Senator Morrison was a barrel-chested man with a politician's handshake and eyes that calculated advantage. His wife Caroline was smaller, more subtle, with the kind of face that suggested she listened more than she spoke. "Congratulations on your marriage," Caroline said, her tone neutral. "It was quite sudden, wasn't it?" "Sometimes you know quickly," Elena said, keeping her voice steady. "When it's right, there's no point in waiting." "How refreshingly impulsive." Caroline's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Adrian doesn't strike me as the impulsive type." "People surprise you," Adrian said smoothly. "Elena, Mrs. Morrison has done incredible work on urban conservation projects. I thought you two might have common interests." It was such an obvious setup that Elena almost laughed, but Caroline's expression shifted slightly, curiosity replacing suspicion. "You're interested in conservation?" Caroline asked. "Landscape architecture specifically, urban green spaces, sustainable design, that kind of thing." Elena decided honesty was less exhausting than performance. I know it's not exactly glamorous dinner party conversation, but I find it more interesting than most topics people want to discuss at these events. Caroline laughed, a genuine sound that made her whole face change. Finally, someone who admits these things are boring. What's your position on the Bryant Park restoration project? I've been following the debate about native versus ornamental plantings. They fell into conversation that had nothing to do with Adrian's business interests and everything to do with the actual subject. Caroline had opinions about biodiversity and public access, about the politics of park funding and the challenge of maintaining green spaces in dense urban environments. Elena forgot to be nervous and just engaged with someone who actually cared about the same things she did. Adrian and the senator drifted away to discuss something else, leaving Elena and Caroline standing by a window overlooking the mansion's gardens. Your husband is trying to use you to soften my position on his financial district project, Caroline said after they'd exhausted the topic of park design. She said it matter-of-factly, without accusation. Elena felt her face heat. Yes, probably. He's very strategic about everything. And yet here you are, having an actual conversation instead of deploying the strategy. Caroline studied her with sharp eyes. That's interesting. I'm not very good at manipulation. It seems exhausting. It is exhausting. That's why I appreciate when people just talk like human beings. Caroline sipped her wine. For what it's worth, I think Adrian's project has merit if he addresses the environmental impact studies properly. But the way he's been approaching it, all legal pressure and political maneuvering, makes me want to block it on principle. Have you told him that? He doesn't listen. Men like your husband hear resistance and think the solution is more pressure. Caroline's expression was knowing. Maybe you can explain it to him in terms he'll actually process. Sometimes the direct approach works better than the strategic one. After Caroline excused herself to greet other guests, Elena stood alone by the window trying to figure out if she'd just been given a gift or a test. Probably both. You're good at this, said a voice beside her, and Elena turned to find a man in his 30s with expensive glasses and the kind of smile that suggested he knew things other people didn't. Sorry, I'm David Reeves. I work with Adrian occasionally on technology investments. Elena Volkov. The name still felt strange in her mouth. I know. Everyone here knows who you are. You're the mystery wife who appeared out of nowhere. David's tone was friendly but probing. I have to admit, I'm curious how you ended up with Adrian. He's been determinedly single for as long as I've known him. We met at a charity event, talked about parks. Turns out we had more in common than expected. Elena delivered the prepared story with what she hoped was convincing casualness. Parks? That's possibly the most boring meet-cute I've ever heard, which somehow makes it more believable. David laughed. Although I have to say the timing is interesting. Right after the whole situation with Victoria Whitmore fell apart. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. I'm not sure what you mean. Just that it's a neat coincidence. Adrian ends one engagement and immediately marries someone else from the same family. People are going to speculate. He said it lightly, but there was an edge underneath. I'm not suggesting anything improper, of course, just observing that optics matter in our circles. Then they can speculate all they want. Lena kept her voice level. My relationship with Adrian has nothing to do with my sister. Of course not. David's smile widened. I'm sure it's exactly as simple as you say. Well, lovely to meet you, Elena. I'm sure we'll see more of each other. He walked away, leaving Elena gripping her champagne glass hard enough to risk breaking it. The conversation had been polite, friendly even, but it carried an unmistakable message. People were watching, judging, looking for weakness. Adrian appeared beside her minutes later, reading her tension immediately. What happened? David Reeves happened. He was very polite while implying our marriage is suspicious timing. Elena set down her champagne before she actually did break the glass. Is everyone here this passive-aggressive, or is it just special treatment for the mysterious new wife? Everyone's like this. It's how these circles function. Attack without attacking. Probe for vulnerability while maintaining plausible deniability. Adrian's jaw tightened. What did he say exactly? Elena repeated the conversation, watching Adrian's expression go cold in a way that made her remember exactly how dangerous he could be when he wanted. I'll handle David, he said quietly. Don't. It'll just make it worse. Make me look like I need protecting. Elena surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. I can deal with speculation and gossip. I grew up with Victoria. I know how this works. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. All right. But if anyone crosses the line from speculation to actual harassment, tell me. They stayed another hour, making the rounds and playing their roles. Elena talked to more people than she could keep track of, smiled until her face hurt, and tried to ignore the weight of speculation following her around the room. By the time they left, she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. In the car on the way home, Adrian was quiet, staring out the window at the city lights. You did well tonight, he said finally. Better than well. Caroline Morrison actually smiled when she talked to you, which is more than I've managed in 3 months of negotiations. She thinks you're too aggressive, that you'd get further with direct honesty than legal pressure. Adrian turned to look at her. She told you that? Yes. She also said your project has merit if you address the environmental concerns properly. Elena leaned her head back against the seat. I think she was testing to see if I'd actually tell you, or if I'd keep it to myself to have leverage. And you're telling me because? Because manipulation is exhausting and I'm too tired to play games. Elena closed her eyes. Also because she's probably right. You do come across as overly aggressive. She expected him to bristle at the criticism, but instead he laughed. A real laugh, not the corporate version. That's possibly the most honest feedback I've gotten in years. Everyone else just tells me what they think I want to hear. Would you prefer I do that? No. He said it with unexpected force. No, I wouldn't. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, which felt like progress of some kind. When they arrived home, Elena kicked off the expensive shoes Simone had sent and immediately felt 3 inches shorter and significantly more human. Thank you, Adrian said as they stood in the foyer. For tonight, for doing this. It's what we agreed to. Elena started toward the stairs, then paused. Adrian? That thing David said about timing and optics. Is it going to be a problem? People will always find something to speculate about. It doesn't matter what they think as long as we know the truth. He loosened his tie, looking as tired as she felt. Get some sleep. We can debrief tomorrow if you want. Elena went upstairs to her room and peeled off the emerald dress, hanging it carefully in the closet like it was evidence of a life she was still trying to understand. She washed off the professional makeup and stared at her regular face in the mirror, trying to reconcile the woman who'd survived a society gala with the woman who'd spent years being invisible. She was getting ready for bed when her phone rang. Maya's number. How did it go? Maya demanded. Surprisingly okay, until someone implied I'm a gold digger who manipulated my way into Adrian's life. Elena climbed into bed, pulling blankets up like armor. But I survived. I had an actual good conversation about landscape architecture, and I only wanted to run away screaming maybe 3 times. That's basically a success story. Maya's voice was warm with relief. See? You can do this. I don't know if I can do it for 12 months, though. Everyone there was performing all the time, calculating every word, looking for advantage in every conversation. It was exhausting. So don't perform. Just be yourself and let them work around it. Maya yawned audibly. You're not required to play their games just because you're in their world now. After they hung up, Elena lay in the dark thinking about performance and authenticity and what it meant to be yourself when you weren't sure who that was anymore. She'd spent so long being what her family needed, invisible, compliant, forgettable, that she'd lost track of what existed underneath the role. Maybe the next 12 months weren't just about surviving an arrangement. Maybe they were about figuring out who Elena actually was when nobody was forcing her to be someone else. The thought was both terrifying and liberating in equal measure. She must have fallen asleep because the next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows and someone was pounding on her door with enough force to suggest emergency. Elena stumbled out of bed and opened the door to find Sarah looking grim. Your family is here, Sarah said. All of them. They're in the driveway demanding to see you, and they won't leave. Elena's stomach dropped. How did they find this address? Does it matter? They're here, they're loud, and they're threatening to call the police if we don't let them in. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. Adrian's in his office on a call, but he said to ask what you want to do. Elena pulled on clothes with shaking hands, her mind racing. She'd known this confrontation was coming eventually, but she'd hoped for more time to prepare. More time to build up defenses that felt stable enough to withstand her family's assault. "Tell them I'll meet them outside in 5 minutes," she said. "And tell Adrian. Tell him I've got this." Sarah nodded and disappeared. Elena finished dressing, stared at her reflection, trying to find courage that felt mostly theoretical, and headed downstairs. Through the front windows, she could see 3 cars in the driveway: her father's Mercedes, her mother's Range Rover, and Victoria's BMW. Her parents stood by the front door looking imperious and furious in equal measure. Victoria paced nearby, still beautiful even in obvious distress, talking rapidly on her phone. Elena took a breath and opened the door. The effect was immediate. Her mother's face contorted with rage. Her father stepped forward like he was preparing to physically block her exit, and Victoria ended her call with violent force. "What the hell have you done?" Catherine's voice could have cut steel. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "I got married. People do it every day." Elena stayed on the top step, using the height advantage. "You should probably leave. This is private property. Private property bought with blood money by a criminal you've shackled yourself to." Richard's face was red, veins standing out on his forehead. "I don't know what he's promised you or how he's manipulated you, but this ends now. You're coming home and we're getting this sham marriage annulled. I'm 24 years old and married of my own free will. There's nothing to annul." Elena was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I'm not coming home. I don't want to see you or hear from you. Please leave." "You ungrateful little—" Catherine started up the steps, but Elena held her ground. "Don't." The word came out sharper than she'd intended. "I've spent my entire life being grateful for scraps of attention, grateful for the smallest bedroom, grateful to be tolerated in my own family. I'm done being grateful for being treated like an inconvenience." "We gave you everything." Catherine's voice climbed toward hysteria. "A home, an education, opportunities you would never have had otherwise. You gave me a room the size of a closet and made me feel like I should be thankful for it. You forgot my birthday 3 years running. You introduced me to people as the other daughter, like I was an afterthought." Elena felt years of accumulated resentment rising in her throat. "You gave me the bare minimum and expected me to worship you for it." Victoria finally spoke, her voice shaking with emotion Elena couldn't identify. "How could you marry him? After what he did to me, how could you?" "He didn't do anything to you, Victoria. He ended an engagement that should never have happened in the first place. And then married you." Victoria's perfect face crumpled. "My own sister. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting for a chance to take something that was mine. Adrian was never yours. You wanted the idea of him, the power, the status, the trophy husband. You didn't know him, and you didn't care to." Elena felt exhausted suddenly, tired of this script they'd been performing for years. "I didn't steal him from you. He chose me because I treated him like a person instead of a prize." "You're delusional if you think he actually cares about you," Victoria shot back. "He's using you for something. Men like Adrian Volkov don't marry nobodies without a reason." The word hit exactly the way it was designed to. Nobody. Elena had heard it before in 1,000 small ways, but having Victoria say it out loud felt like a physical blow. "Maybe I am nobody to you," Elena said quietly. "But I'd rather be nobody than spend my life trying to be somebody you'd approve of." "This is ridiculous." Richard moved up another step, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne. "You're coming home right now, Elena. We'll discuss this like adults once you've calmed down and stopped this childish rebellion." "I'm not rebelling. I'm leaving." Elena stood her ground, even though every instinct screamed at her to back away. "I don't owe you explanations or apologies. I made a choice. It's done." "You made a mistake that you're going to regret for the rest of your life," Catherine said, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. "When Adrian Volkov destroys you, and he will destroy you because that's what men like him do, don't come crawling back to us expecting sympathy." "I won't," Elena said. "I promise you that much." The door opened behind her, and Adrian stepped out onto the porch. He didn't touch Elena, didn't even stand particularly close, but his presence changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," he said with perfect courtesy that somehow sounded like a threat, "I believe my wife has asked you to leave. I'd suggest you respect that request." "You have no right to keep her from her family," Richard started, But Adrian cut him off with a look. I'm not keeping her from anyone. Elena is an adult making her own choices. If she wants to see you, she will. If she doesn't, that's also her choice. His tone was pleasant, conversational, and absolutely inflexible. But you don't get to show up at my home making demands and threats. That's not how this works. How dare you, Catherine began, but Adrian continued like she hadn't spoken. I have security footage of this entire conversation. I also have very good lawyers who would be happy to discuss harassment and trespassing if this happens again. He pulled out his phone. Would you like me to call them now, or would you prefer to leave voluntarily? Victoria made a sound somewhere between a sob and a scream. I hate you both. I hope you're miserable together. She stalked back to her car, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows, and peeled out of the driveway with enough force to leave rubber on the pristine pavement. Catherine and Richard followed more slowly, shooting looks that promised this wasn't over. But they left, which was what mattered. Elena stood on the porch, watching the cars disappear, feeling like she'd just survived something that should have destroyed her but somehow hadn't. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline crash hitting hard now that the confrontation was over. You okay? Adrian asked quietly. No, but I will be. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm morning. Thank you for backing me up. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. We're in this together, remember? He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, you handled that better than I expected. Most people crumble when their families deploy guilt that aggressively. I've had a lot of practice not crumbling. Elena turned to go back inside, then paused. Adrian? Victoria called me a nobody. Do you think that's what I am? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I think nobody is what people call someone when they can't control them anymore. It's not a description, it's a weapon. And the fact that it still hurts means you haven't completely stopped caring what they think. Is that bad? It's human. He held the door open for her. Come on. Thomas made breakfast, and you look like you need coffee before you fall over. They sat in the kitchen eating eggs and toast while Elena's hands slowly stopped shaking. Adrian didn't push her to talk, didn't demand explanations or emotional processing. He just sat across from her, being present in a way that felt more supportive than any words could have been. They'll keep trying, Elena said finally. My family doesn't give up easily when they think they're right. Neither do I. Adrian poured more coffee into her cup. And I have significantly more resources than they do. If they escalate, we'll handle it. Together. The word together did something strange to Elena's chest. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, a clean transaction with clear boundaries. But somewhere between the gala performance and her family's confrontation, something had shifted. They were becoming something that looked uncomfortably like actual partners. I need to go for a walk, she said abruptly, needing space to think. Clear my head. Take Marcus with you. After this morning, I'd rather you had security nearby. Elena wanted to argue, but couldn't find the energy. She changed into comfortable clothes, and Marcus drove her to a park she'd found on her explorations earlier in the week. He stayed by the car while she walked paths designed to look natural, despite being completely manufactured. The park was busy with weekend crowds, families, couples, people existing in their own lives without any awareness of Elena's current crisis. She found that oddly comforting, the reminder that the world was bigger than her problems. Her phone buzzed. Maya, checking in. Elena sent back a brief message that she was fine, which was technically true even if it felt like a lie. She walked for an hour, letting the movement quiet her racing thoughts. Her family had come, had said terrible things, and had left. She'd stood her ground and survived. That had to count for something. When she got back to the house, Adrian was in the library with his laptop, working through what looked like endless emails. He glanced up when she entered. Better? He asked. Getting there. Elena sat in the chair across from him, suddenly not wanting to be alone. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. When's the last time you let someone actually know you? Not just work with you or do business with you, but actually know you? Adrian was quiet for long enough that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I was 19. Her name was Natasha. She died in a car accident 6 months after we met. After that, I decided knowing people was too expensive. The information landed like a physical thing between them. Elena hadn't expected actual honesty, and now that she had it, she wasn't sure what to do with it. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "It was a long time ago." Adrian closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. "Why are you asking?" "Because I'm trying to figure out if we're just performing this arrangement or if something real is happening underneath it." Elena met his eyes. "And I think maybe you're trying to figure out the same thing." "Maybe I am." He stood, moved to the window overlooking the gardens. "The contract says we terminate if romantic feelings develop, but it doesn't define what counts as romantic versus just caring what happens to someone." "Is that what you're doing? Caring what happens to me?" "Yes." He said it simply, like it was a fact he'd already accepted. "Which wasn't part of the plan, but here we are." Elena joined him at the window, standing close enough to feel the warmth of him, but not touching. "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. The smart thing would be to pull back, maintain boundaries, remember this is temporary." Adrian turned to look at her. "But I'm tired of only doing smart things. Smart things made me very successful and very lonely." "What's the alternative?" "We see where this goes, carefully, with eyes open." His hand found hers, tentative in a way she'd never seen from him. "No promises, no expectations, just see what happens." It was possibly the least romantic proposal for anything Elena had ever heard. It was also honest in a way that made her chest ache. "Okay," she said. "We see where it goes." They stood at the window holding hands like teenagers, and Elena thought about Martha's warning that the line between performing and feeling gets blurry. She was pretty sure they'd already crossed that line without noticing, and she had no idea if that was a disaster or the best decision she'd made yet. Outside, the gardens bloomed with calculated beauty, every plant chosen for specific purpose and aesthetic effect. It should have felt artificial, but somehow it just felt intentional. Someone had decided this mattered enough to get it right. Maybe that's what she and Adrian were doing, deciding this mattered enough to try. The shift was subtle at first, easy to miss if Elena hadn't been paying attention. Adrian started coming home earlier, joining her for dinner more consistently. Their conversation stretched longer, moved beyond safe topics into actual territory. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, opinions on things that didn't matter for business but mattered for understanding each other. He asked about her degree in communications that her parents had chosen, and she admitted she'd wanted to study environmental design but had been told it wasn't practical. He told her about growing up in a family where weakness meant death, though he didn't elaborate and she didn't push. 3 weeks after the gala, Elena woke to find a package outside her door. Inside was a book on contemporary landscape architecture and a note in Adrian's precise handwriting. "Thought you might find this interesting. A." It was such a small gesture, but it made Elena's throat tight in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. Someone had paid attention to what she cared about and acted on it without being asked. That shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but it did. She found him in the kitchen drinking coffee and reading something on his phone, already dressed for whatever meetings filled his day. "Thank you for the book," she said, holding it up. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. I wanted to." He glanced at her, then away, like he wasn't sure how to handle gratitude. "There's a lecture series starting next month at the university, Urban Planning and Sustainable Design. I thought maybe you'd want to go." Elena stared at him. "You researched lecture series about landscape architecture?" "Claire researched it. I just asked her to look." But his ears had gone slightly red, which was possibly the most humanizing thing Elena had ever seen from him. "If you're not interested, that's fine. Just thought it might be something you'd enjoy." "I'd love to go." Elena sat across from him, cradling her own coffee. "Adrian, are we actually becoming friends?" "I think we might be." He said it carefully, like he was testing the words. "Is that a problem?" "No, just unexpected." Elena traced the rim of her cup. "The contract says we terminate if romantic feelings develop, but it doesn't say anything about friendship." Another loophole we didn't account for. Adrian's mouth quirked into something almost like a smile. "Friendship might be more dangerous than romance. At least romance has clear warning signs." "What are the warning signs for friendship?" "Caring what happens to someone. wanting them to be happy, missing them when they're not around. He met her eyes, buying them books about landscape architecture because you know it matters to them. Elena felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Those sound like warning signs we should probably pay attention to. Probably. Are you planning to? Not even a little bit. The honesty surprised her, but it also felt right. You? No. Adrian stood, collected his things for the day. I have a dinner meeting tonight, won't be home until late. But tomorrow I'm clear. We could do something if you want. Like what? I don't know. Normal people things? Dinner somewhere that isn't a business obligation, a movie, whatever you want. He paused at the doorway. I've forgotten how to do things just because they're enjoyable. Might be time to relearn. After he left, Elena sat in the kitchen holding her new book and trying to make sense of what was happening. They'd started this as a transaction. 12 months, clear boundaries, mutual benefit. But somewhere along the way, the boundaries had gotten blurry. They were becoming something neither of them had planned for, and Elena wasn't sure if that was beautiful or terrifying, possibly both. She spent the day reading the book Adrian had given her, taking notes, letting herself get lost in concepts of design and space and how humans interacted with their environments. It felt like coming home to a part of herself she'd buried to be practical, to meet expectations, to be the daughter her parents could tolerate. Maya called in the afternoon, her voice bright with forced cheer. How's married life in the fancy house with the dangerous man? Confusing. Elena moved to the window seat in her room, looking out at gardens she'd started to recognize. He bought me a book, Maya, just because he thought I'd like it. That bastard. How dare he be thoughtful? You know what I mean. This was supposed to be simple. Business arrangement, no feelings, clean exit at the end. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest. But he's not what I expected. And I think I'm not what he expected either. So what happens now? I have no idea. We're just seeing where it goes, which is possibly the stupidest thing I've ever done. Or the bravest, Maya countered. You've spent your whole life playing it safe, being invisible, not rocking the boat. Maybe it's time to risk something that actually matters. After they hung up, Elena thought about risk and safety and what it meant to choose uncertainty over the comfortable misery she'd known before. Her family had offered safety, the same small room, the same dismissal, the same slow suffocation. Adrian offered uncertainty, which was terrifying but also alive in a way safety never was. The next evening, Adrian took her to a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood she'd never explored. No reservations under his name, no corner table where he could watch the room, no business associates to impress. Just two people eating pasta and talking about nothing important. This is weird, Elena said, twirling linguine around her fork. Being out with you and not having to perform for anyone. Good weird or bad weird? Good, definitely good. She studied him across the table, this man who commanded rooms and intimidated senators but looked almost uncertain eating dinner in a tiny restaurant. Do you ever do normal things just for yourself? Not really. Everything's usually calculated for some purpose. Adrian broke bread with careful precision. I told you, I've been strategic for so long I forgot how to just exist without an agenda. So what's the agenda tonight? There isn't one. That's the point. He met her eyes. I wanted to have dinner with you, not because it serves a business purpose or maintains appearances, just because I wanted to. The simplicity of it made Elena's chest ache. I've never had anyone want to spend time with me just for the sake of it. My family tolerated me. Victoria competed with me. Everyone else ignored me. You're the first person who seems to actually choose my company. Then everyone else was an idiot. Adrian said it matter-of-factly, like it was obvious. You're interesting, Elena. You see things other people miss. You care about things that matter. Anyone who didn't notice that was looking at you wrong. Elena had to look away, overwhelmed by emotions she didn't have names for. You're making it really hard to keep appropriate boundaries. It's like, good. I've decided boundaries are overrated. He signaled for more wine. We have 9 months left on the contract. We can spend them pretending this is just business, or we can acknowledge that something real is happening and deal with it like adults. What does dealing with it like adults look like? I have no idea. I've never done this before. Adrian's admission was so honest it was almost painful. I'm very good at business negotiations and strategic planning. I'm terrible at actual human connection, but I'm willing to try if you are. Even though the contract says the contract was written by lawyers to protect transactions, this isn't a transaction anymore. He reached across the table, his hand finding hers. Unless you want it to be. In which case, I'll back off and we'll maintain the original terms. Your choice. Elena looked at their joined hands, at this dangerous man who'd given her an escape route and was now offering something that looked uncomfortably like actual partnership. Every rational instinct told her to choose safety, to maintain distance, to protect herself from inevitable hurt. But she was tired of choosing safety, tired of protecting herself from life. I don't want to back off, she said quietly. I want to see where this goes, even if it's stupid and risky and probably ends badly. It probably will end badly, Adrian agreed. I'm not good at this. I'll mess it up. I'll be too controlling or too distant or too whatever else I do wrong. And I'll probably be too hesitant or too damaged from my family or too used to being invisible. Elena squeezed his hand. But maybe we mess it up together and figure it out as we go. That's possibly the worst relationship plan I've ever heard. Do you have a better one? No? Adrian smiled, genuine and unrehearsed. Not even close. They finished dinner talking about everything and nothing, and when they left the restaurant, Adrian kept her hand in his as they walked back to where Marcus had parked. It felt natural, easy in a way Elena hadn't expected, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. In the car, Adrian pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. Elena let herself lean into him, breathing in his cologne and feeling his warmth and thinking this was either the best decision or the worst decision she'd ever made. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me. For choosing me. For making me feel like I matter. Adrian pressed a kiss to the top of her head, gentle and unexpected. You've always mattered, Elena. The fact that your family couldn't see it doesn't make it less true. When they got home, they stood in the foyer like teenagers unsure how to end a date. The house was quiet, the staff long gone for the night, just the two of them in the enormous space. I should probably go to bed, Elena said, not moving. Probably. Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch careful. Or you could stay here and we could keep talking. About what? Anything. Everything. I don't care. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I just don't want you to leave yet. Elena's breath caught. They were standing so close she could count his eyelashes, could see the exact moment his control started to crack. She should step back, should maintain some kind of boundary, should remember this was supposed to be careful and eyes open. Instead, she kissed him. It was tentative at first, testing, making sure this was wanted. But Adrian responded immediately, his arms coming around her and pulling her closer, and suddenly tentative became urgent. Elena's hands found his hair, his shirt, anything to anchor herself as the world tilted sideways. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. That was probably a mistake, Adrian said, his voice rough. Definitely a mistake. Elena kissed him again, slower this time, savoring it. We should stop. We should. But he didn't let her go, and she didn't try to leave, and they stood there in the foyer kissing like the world might end if they stopped. Eventually, practical reality intervened. They pulled apart, flushed and disheveled, and Elena felt like she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. We should talk about this, Adrian said. Tomorrow. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Elena stepped back, needing space to think. Right now I need to go to my room before I do something even more stupid. More stupid than kissing your contract husband? Exactly. Elena started toward the stairs, then turned back. For what it's worth, I don't regret it. Neither do I. Adrian looked wrecked in the best way, his careful control completely shattered. Sleep well, Elena. She made it to her room before her knees gave out, sitting on the edge of the bed and touching her lips like she could still feel him there. This was supposed to be simple. A business arrangement with clear terms and an exit date. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. Her phone buzzed. Maya, with impeccable timing. How was normal people dinner with the dangerous husband? Elena typed back. I kissed him. The response came immediately. What? Call me right now. But Elena turned off her phone and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her head and trying to figure out if she'd just made everything better or ruined it completely. The next morning arrived with the awkwardness she'd been dreading. Elena went downstairs to find Adrian already in the kitchen, and they did an elaborate dance of not quite meeting each other's eyes while pretending everything was normal. "Coffee?" he offered. "Please." They sat at the table with careful distance between them, the memory of last night hanging in the air like smoke. "We should probably discuss what happened," Adrian said finally. "We probably should." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I'm not sorry it happened, but I don't know what it means or what we do about it." "Neither do I." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she was starting to recognize. "The contract says if romantic feelings develop, we terminate early, but I don't want to terminate. I want to figure this out." "So we ignore the contract?" "We modify it. Add an addendum that acknowledges things have changed and we're choosing to proceed anyway." Adrian pulled out his phone, already typing. "I'll have my lawyer draft something. Clear terms, updated expectations, exit clauses if it becomes untenable." "You want to contract our way through developing feelings for each other?" Elena couldn't help but laugh. "That's possibly the most you thing I've ever heard. It's what I know how to do. Make things official, create structure, protect both parties." He looked up from his phone. "Unless you'd rather we just see what happens without documentation?" "No, you're right. Having clear terms makes sense." Elena reached across the table, her hand finding his. "As long as the terms include the option to just be human and messy and figure it out as we go, I can work with that." Adrian squeezed her hand. "I should warn you, I'm going to be terrible at this. I'll probably overthink everything and try to solve problems with strategy instead of emotions. And I'll probably be too cautious and too damaged and too used to expecting people to leave." Elena met his eyes. "But we already knew that about each other. We're just choosing to try anyway." "Choosing to try." I like that better than falling in love or any of that romantic nonsense. Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. "No promises about outcomes, just commitment to the attempt." "Very romantic," Elena teased. "I'm not romantic. I'm practical." But he kissed her anyway, soft and deliberate, like he was memorizing the feel of it. "I have meetings all day, but tonight, let's have dinner here and actually talk about what this looks like going forward." "Okay, that sounds—" The doorbell rang, cutting her off. They both froze, and Elena felt dread pool in her stomach. Nobody just showed up at this house. The gates, the security, the private road, casual visitors weren't possible. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Mr. Volkov, there's a Detective Chen here to see you. She says it's urgent." Adrian's entire demeanor shifted, the warmth draining out of him as corporate armor slid back into place. "Show her to my office. Elena, stay here." "What's going on?" "I don't know yet, but police don't show up at 7 in the morning for social calls." He was already moving toward his office, his phone out and fingers flying across the screen. "Marcus, get our attorney on the phone." Elena stood in the kitchen feeling useless and scared as voices drifted from the office. Adrian's controlled and measured, a woman's firm and professional. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was wrong. Something was very wrong. 20 minutes later, Adrian emerged looking like he'd aged 5 years. His face was carefully blank, which scared Elena more than anger would have. "What happened?" she asked. "There's been an incident, a fire at one of my construction sites last night. Someone died." His voice was flat, emotionless. "The police think it might have been arson, and they're investigating whether I'm involved." Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. "That's insane. You would never—" "It doesn't matter what I would or wouldn't do. It matters what they can prove or make people believe." Adrian's jaw was tight. "I have enemies, Elena. People who would love to see me destroyed. This could be them making a move." "What do we do?" "You do nothing. You stay out of this completely." He was already heading for the door, keys in hand. "I need to meet with my legal team, deal with the investigation, manage the fallout. This is going to get ugly." "Adrian, wait. Not now. I can't—" He stopped, visibly forcing himself to breathe. "I'm sorry. I need to handle this. Stay here where it's safe." Then he was gone, leaving Elena standing in the foyer with coffee going cold and the fragile thing they'd been building feeling like it might shatter under the weight of reality. The day dragged like a prison sentence. Elena tried to distract herself with the book Adrian had given her, but she couldn't focus. She called Maya, who offered support but couldn't make any of it better. She paced the house like a caged animal, while Sarah tried to pretend everything was normal. The news broke online around noon. Headlines screaming about deadly fire, arson investigation, Adrian Volkov's name attached to words like negligence and suspicious circumstances. Elena read the articles feeling sick, watching people who didn't know him tear apart his reputation based on speculation and old grudges. Adrian didn't come home for dinner. He texted around 8. Dealing with lawyers. Don't wait up. Elena ate alone in the dining room and tried not to think about how quickly everything had fallen apart. Yesterday they'd been having dinner and talking about trying, and today the world was trying to destroy him while she sat in his house completely useless. She was getting ready for bed when she heard the front door open, footsteps heavy on the stairs. She opened her door to find Adrian standing in the hallway looking completely wrecked, tie gone, shirt wrinkled, exhaustion written into every line of his body. "You're still awake," he said, like he'd expected her to be asleep. "Of course I'm still awake. I've been worried about you." Elena moved toward him. "Are you okay?" "No, but I will be." He leaned against the wall like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "The investigation is ongoing. My lawyers think it's circumstantial, that they don't have actual evidence connecting me to anything criminal, but the damage to my reputation is already done." "What do you need?" "Honestly, I don't know." Adrian closed his eyes. "I've spent all day managing crises and controlling narratives and trying to protect my business. I'm exhausted, and I don't know." Elena took his hand, pulled him gently toward her room. "Come on." "Elena, just come here. You don't have to do anything or be anything. Just exist for a minute without having to perform." She guided him to her bed, and he collapsed onto it like his strings had been cut. Elena lay down beside him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence. "I'm sorry," Adrian said quietly. "This isn't what you signed up for. Neither is falling for you, but here we are." Elena reached for his hand in the darkness. "Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out, together. Remember? Together." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not used to together. I'm used to handling everything alone." "We'll get used to it. You're stuck with me for 9 more months at minimum." Elena shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Try to sleep. Tomorrow we'll deal with whatever comes next." She felt him relax incrementally, his breathing evening out as exhaustion won over stress. Elena lay awake long after he fell asleep, listening to him breathe and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. This was supposed to be a clean transaction, but there was nothing clean about caring what happened to someone, about wanting to protect them from a world that seemed determined to tear them down. The next week was a blur of lawyers and investigators and damage control. Adrian disappeared into his office for hours at a time, emerging only for brief meals where he barely spoke. The warmth they'd been building evaporated under the pressure of the investigation, replaced by the efficient stranger Elena had married. She tried to give him space while also being present, a balance she had no idea how to strike. Sarah provided updates when Adrian forgot to, and Marcus drove Elena to the lecture series Adrian had mentioned before everything exploded, which felt absurd under the circumstances, but also necessary for maintaining some kind of normalcy. 10 days after the fire, the police announced they'd arrested someone, a disgruntled former employee with a history of threats against Adrian's company. The evidence was clear: premeditated arson, no connection to Adrian beyond being collateral damage of someone else's vendetta. Adrian's name was cleared officially, though the damage to his reputation would take longer to repair. Elena was in the library when he found her that evening, standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was welcome in his own house. "It's over," he said. "The investigation, the accusations, all of it." "I heard. Sarah told me." Elena closed her book. "How are you feeling?" "Relieved, angry, exhausted." He moved into the room, sitting in the chair across from her. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For shutting you out. For reverting to handling everything alone when I should have let you in. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. He wasn't bothering to hide. You said we were in this together, and I forgot that the second things got difficult. You were dealing with a crisis. That's understandable. It's not acceptable. Not if we're actually trying to build something real. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm used to protecting myself by not letting anyone close enough to matter. But you matter, Elena, and when things got hard, my instinct was to push you away to keep you safe. That's not partnership. That's cowardice. Elena set down her book and moved to kneel in front of him, taking his hands. You're not a coward. You're someone who's been hurt badly enough to build walls that kept you alive. But those walls don't have to stay up forever. I don't know how to take them down. We figure it out together, slowly, with lots of mistakes and communication and probably some fights. Elena squeezed his hands. But we do it together, not separately. That's the deal. Adrian pulled her up and into his lap, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heartbeat. I thought I was doing you a favor with this arrangement, giving you an escape route, some financial security, but you've given me something I didn't know I needed. What's that? A reason to try being human instead of just strategic. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. Thank you for not giving up on me when I shut down. Thank you for coming back when you could have stayed shut down. Elena rested her head against his chest. We're both pretty damaged, aren't we? Completely. But maybe we're damaged in compatible ways. Adrian's arms tightened around her. 9 months left on the contract. Think we can make it? I think we can try. That's all we promised anyway. Elena pulled back to look at him. Although we might need to renegotiate some terms. What kind of terms? The separate bedrooms clause feels unnecessarily restrictive at this point. She felt her face heat, but pushed forward anyway. I'd like to amend it to reflect current reality. Adrian's smile was slow and devastating. Current reality being? That I want to wake up next to you. That I want this to be real, not just a performance. Elena took a breath. That I'm falling for you, and I don't want to fight it anymore. Elena, I know it's risky and stupid and probably violates multiple contract clauses, but I don't care. I choose this. I choose you. She cupped his face. If you want to choose me back. Adrian answered by kissing her, deep and thorough and full of everything he couldn't say with words. When they finally broke apart, he was smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. I choose you back, he said quietly. I choose this. Whatever it becomes, however it ends, I choose trying. They spent that night together, not performing or strategizing or maintaining appropriate distance. Just two damaged people choosing to be vulnerable with each other, choosing to try despite every reason they had to protect themselves. In the morning, Elena woke wrapped in Adrian's arms in his bed, sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked gardens she'd started to think of as home. He was still asleep, his face peaceful in a way she rarely saw when he was conscious. This was supposed to be temporary, a 12-month arrangement with a clean exit. But lying there watching him sleep, Elena knew with complete certainty that she'd already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She was in love with Adrian Volkov. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. 3 years had passed since Elena signed a contract that was supposed to last 12 months, and she still remembered the exact moment everything changed. Not the wedding, not the first gala, but the morning she woke up and realized Adrian's side of the bed was empty, and it bothered her. They'd stopped maintaining separate bedrooms about 8 months into the arrangement, a shift that happened so gradually neither of them could identify when it became permanent. One night, Adrian had fallen asleep on her couch while they were talking. The next week, she'd done the same in his room. Eventually, the pretense of separation felt more exhausting than just admitting they wanted to be in the same space. The contract had been ceremonially burned at the 1-year mark, in a small ceremony with just the two of them and a bottle of wine that cost more than Elena's first car. They'd remarried 2 months later in a quiet courthouse ceremony that was somehow more meaningful than the first one, with Maya and Marcus as witnesses and no photographers waiting outside. But this morning, the empty bed sent alarm bells through Elena's system because Adrian never left without saying something first. She grabbed her phone and found a text from 3 hours ago. Had to handle something. Don't worry. Back soon. Don't worry was code for exactly the opposite, and Elena had learned to read Adrian's understatements over the years. They'd built something real from their calculated arrangement. She was downstairs making coffee when Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway looking grim in a way that made Elena's stomach drop. Mrs. Volkov, there's a situation developing. Adrian asked me to keep you informed. Sarah's tone was carefully neutral. There's been a threat made against him, and by extension, against you. He's handling it, but he wanted you aware in case security protocols need to change. Elena set down her coffee cup before her shaking hands could drop it. What kind of threat? The serious kind. That's all I'm authorized to say. Sarah's expression softened slightly. He's being careful. Marcus is with him, and he has the best security money can buy. But he wanted you to know there might be some disruption today. After Sarah left, Elena tried to focus on normal activities, answering emails, reviewing plans for the community garden project she'd been developing in the Eastern District. But her attention kept fragmenting, checking her phone every 5 minutes for updates that didn't come. By noon, her anxiety had crystallized into anger. She called Adrian's number and got voicemail. She tried Marcus and got the same. Whatever was happening, they deliberately cut her out of the information loop, and the protective impulse that probably motivated it just made her furious. She was pacing the library when her phone finally rang, a number she didn't recognize. Elena Volkov? The voice was male, unfamiliar, with an edge that made her skin crawl. Who is this? Someone who has something you want. Your husband made some poor business decisions that affected people who don't forgive easily. We have him. If you want him back, you'll follow instructions exactly. The world tilted sideways. Elena grabbed the desk to stay upright, her mind racing through possibilities and probabilities. If you've hurt him, he's alive, for now, but that continues only if you cooperate. The voice was clinical, detached. You have 1 hour to gather $2 million in cash. Unmarked bills, nothing traceable. Bring it to the address I'm texting you. Come alone. No police, no security. If we see anyone else, he dies. Understand? Yes. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. 1 hour, alone. I understand. The call ended. A text arrived with an address in the warehouse district, exactly the kind of place where bad things happened in movies and apparently also in real life. Elena should have called the police, should have contacted Marcus or Sarah or literally anyone with more experience handling criminal extortion than she had. Instead, she went to Adrian's office, the one room she'd never entered without permission, and opened the safe she'd watched him use enough times to know the combination. The cash wasn't there for ransom situations, but Adrian had explained once that liquid assets were useful for emergencies. $2 million was a fraction of what the safe contained, and Elena grabbed it with shaking hands, stuffing bills into a gym bag she found in the closet. She was halfway to the garage when Sarah intercepted her. "Where are you going with that bag?" Sarah's eyes went to the lumpy duffel, then back to Elena's face. "Mrs. Volkov, what's happening?" "I can't explain. I need to go, right now." Elena tried to push past her, but Sarah blocked the doorway with surprising strength for someone in her 60s. If Adrian is in trouble, running off alone is exactly what he'd tell you not to do. They have him, Sarah. They called me, they gave me an address, and they said, come alone, or he dies. Elena felt tears threatening and forced them back. I can't risk his life on whether the police can coordinate a rescue in time. I have to go. Sarah's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on resigned determination. I'm calling Marcus, and I'm tracking your phone. You go to that address, but you're not going in completely blind. They said alone, and you will be alone when you arrive. But Marcus will know where you are, and if something goes wrong, he can respond. Sarah pulled out her phone. This is non-negotiable, Elena. You want to save Adrian? Fine. But you don't get to throw your life away stupidly. Elena didn't have time to argue. She grabbed car keys and drove toward the warehouse district with her heart hammering and the gym bag of cash in the passenger seat. The address led to a building that looked abandoned, windows broken and graffiti covering every surface. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. I'm 2 blocks away. You go in, I wait for signal. If you're not out in 20 minutes, I'm coming in. Elena sent back a thumbs-up emoji that felt absurd given the circumstances, then grabbed the bag and walked toward the entrance on legs that felt like they might give out. Inside, the warehouse was exactly as grim as expected. Concrete floors, broken machinery, shadows that could hide anything. She followed the sound of voices to a cleared area where 3 men stood around Adrian, who was tied to a chair with blood on his face and murder in his eyes. "I brought the money," Elena said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Let him go." The apparent leader, a man in his 40s with the kind of face that suggested violence was a hobby, smiled without warmth. "Mrs. Volkov, how cooperative. Set the bag down and step back." Elena did as instructed, watching one of the other men verify the cash contents. The leader kept a gun pointed casually in Adrian's direction, and Elena felt rage burning through her fear. This was what his world looked like underneath the galas and business deals. Real danger, real consequences. People who used violence like a negotiating tool. "Money's good," the man counting confirmed. "Excellent," the leader gestured with his gun. "You can go now, Mrs. Volkov. Your husband will be released once we're safely away." "No." Elena didn't move. "He comes with me now, or the money stays." "That's not how this works." "Then shoot me too, because I'm not leaving without him." Elena was distantly aware she was being stupid, that calling their bluff could get them both killed, but she couldn't make herself care. "You got your money. We're both walking out of here." The leader studied her with something like amusement. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." Elena met his eyes. "But I mean it. Kill us both or let us both go. Those are your options." For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then the leader laughed and lowered his gun. "You know what? I like you. You've got spine." He nodded to one of his men, who cut Adrian's restraints. "Take your husband and get out. And tell him we're even now. Next time he interferes in our business, there won't be a ransom option." Adrian stood on unsteady legs, and Elena moved to support him. They walked toward the exit together, Elena half expecting a bullet in the back the entire way. But they made it outside into afternoon sunlight that felt surreal after the darkness of the warehouse. Marcus's car appeared within seconds, and they collapsed into the back seat. Marcus took one look at Adrian's face and drove toward the nearest hospital without being told. "You're an idiot," Adrian said, his voice rough. "You should have called the police, not ransomed me yourself." "You're welcome." Elena was shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing. "Also, you're bleeding. Stop talking and let me see how bad it is." The hospital visit revealed a concussion, bruised ribs, and various cuts that required stitches, but nothing permanently damaging. Adrian submitted to treatment with poor grace, complaining about wasted time and unnecessary precautions. Elena sat beside him, wanting to alternately hug him and hit him for scaring her like this. "How did they get you?" she asked, once they were alone in the examination room. "Ambush outside a meeting. I was careless." Adrian touched the bandage on his forehead and winced. "They're connected to a development deal I shut down 3 months ago. Apparently, they took it personally." "People keep taking your business decisions personally. Maybe that's something to work on." Elena tried for light, but it came out shaky. "Probably." Adrian reached for her hand. "You shouldn't have come alone. That was reckless and dangerous and incredibly stupid." "I wasn't alone. Sarah called Marcus, he tracked my phone, and I had backup 2 blocks away." Elena squeezed his hand harder than necessary. "But yes, it was reckless. So was marrying you in the first place, and that worked out reasonably well." "Reasonably well?" Adrian's smile was pained but genuine. "That's possibly the least romantic description of our marriage I've ever heard. Romance is overrated. I prefer functional partnership with occasional death-defying rescue missions." They sat in the sterile hospital room holding hands like lifelines, and Elena thought about the contract they'd burned 2 years ago. The clause about terminating if romantic feelings developed had seemed so reasonable at the time, a logical safeguard against complications. But love didn't develop in clean, linear ways that could be managed with legal language. It crept in through shared dinners and quiet conversations, through Adrian remembering how she took her coffee and Elena learning to read his moods from across a room. She'd been in love with him for at least a year before she'd admitted it to herself, and probably longer before she'd admitted it to him. And even then, they'd never used the actual word. It felt too loaded, too demanding of certainty they didn't have. But sitting in a hospital after ransoming him from criminals who'd beaten him bloody, Elena figured certainty was overrated too. "I love you," she said abruptly, in case that wasn't clear from the whole ransom situation. Adrian looked at her with an expression that was complicated and vulnerable in ways she rarely saw. I know. I've known for a while. And I love you too, which is terrifying and inconvenient and the best thing that's ever happened to me. He pulled her closer, careful of his injuries. I didn't plan this. Any of it. But I'm glad you forced your way into my life and refused to leave. I'm very stubborn. Yes, you are. It's one of your better qualities. They left the hospital with discharge instructions and pain medication, and Elena drove them home while Adrian dozed in the passenger seat. The house looked exactly the same as when she'd left it hours ago in a panic, but somehow everything felt different. They'd survived something that should have broken them, and instead it had just proven what they'd built was stronger than the sum of its calculated parts. The months after the kidnapping were complicated. Adrian implemented better security protocols. Elena started training in self-defense because helplessness was apparently something she couldn't tolerate anymore, and they both accepted that his world came with dangers that couldn't be completely eliminated. But they also started living more deliberately. Weekend trips to places neither of them had seen. Dinners where they actually talked instead of just exchanging information. Lazy mornings where work could wait and being together mattered more than efficiency. Elena's community garden project broke ground in the spring, a collaboration with the city that turned abandoned lots into green spaces for neighborhoods that needed them. Adrian pulled strings and contributed funding, but the design and vision were entirely Elena's. Standing at the opening ceremony watching children play in spaces she'd helped create, Elena felt something settle into place. This was what she'd been looking for all those years of being invisible. Not to be seen by her family, but to create something that mattered in a way she could point to and say, I did this. Victoria appeared at the garden opening, which Elena hadn't expected. Her sister looked different, still beautiful, but with something harder around the edges, like life had sanded off the polish. It looks good, Victoria said, gesturing at the garden. The design. It's actually impressive. Thank you. Elena waited for the other shoe to drop, the insult hidden in compliment. I came to apologize. Victoria said it like the words hurt. For what I said when you married Adrian, for how I treated you our whole lives, for being a terrible sister. Elena studied her sister's face, looking for manipulation and finding only exhaustion. What happened to you? Life happened. Turns out being perfect all the time is exhausting and unsustainable, and eventually you crash hard enough to break. Victoria smiled without humor. I married someone for the right reasons. Money, status, all the things that were supposed to matter. He was charming at parties and cruel at home. I left him 6 months ago, and I've been trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for an audience. I'm sorry that happened to you. Don't be. I made my choices. Victoria looked at the children playing, something wistful crossing her face. I was jealous of you, you know. Even when I was treating you like you were invisible. You were always more genuine, more real. I resented that. I was invisible because you made me invisible, Elena said, old anger stirring. I know, and I'm sorry. Victoria met her eyes directly. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did, who I was, and I'm trying to be different. Elena considered her sister, this broken version of perfection, and felt something complicated shift in her chest. Victoria had spent years making Elena feel worthless, and one apology couldn't erase that damage. But holding on to rage was exhausting, and Elena was tired of letting her past define her present. I'm not ready to have you in my life regularly, Elena said carefully, but maybe we can start with occasional coffee and see where it goes. That's more than fair. Victoria's smile was tentative but genuine. Thank you. After Victoria left, Adrian found Elena standing alone by the garden entrance, watching sunset paint the sky orange and purple. How are you doing? He asked, sliding an arm around her waist. Processing. Victoria apologized, which I didn't see coming. Elena leaned into him, solid and warm. I don't know if I can forgive her, but maybe I can stop letting what she did control how I see myself. That's probably healthier than forgiveness anyway. Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. You've built something here that has nothing to do with your family or their opinions. This is all you. Elena looked at this garden, the careful design, the intentional beauty, the space she'd created for people who needed it. Then she looked at Adrian, at the life they'd built from a contract meant to last 12 months and nothing more. She'd spent so many years being invisible, being the daughter nobody wanted, the sister everyone forgot. She'd thought worth came from being seen by the right people, from finally earning approval that had been withheld her whole life. But standing in a garden she'd designed, married to a man who'd seen her when she was nobody, Elena realized the truth was simpler and harder than that. Worth wasn't something other people could give or take away. It was something she'd had all along, buried under years of being told she wasn't enough. Adrian hadn't made her valuable by choosing her. He'd just recognized what was already there. "Ready to go home?" Adrian asked, and Elena nodded. Home. Not the house she'd grown up in where she'd never belonged, but the space they'd created together, imperfect and real, and theirs. They drove through the city as evening settled into night, past buildings Adrian owned and parks Elena had helped improve. Their life looked nothing like the careful contract they'd signed in a lawyer's office 3 years ago. It was messier, more complicated, more dangerous, and more beautiful than either of them had planned. But then, the best things usually were. At home, Sarah had left dinner warming in the oven, and a note saying she'd taken the evening off to visit her daughter. Elena and Adrian ate in the kitchen like they had 1,000 times before, talking about nothing important, just existing together in the comfortable way that came from actually knowing each other. "I was thinking," Adrian said over dessert that Thomas had left with instructions on proper serving temperature, "we should renew our vows, properly this time, with people who matter, not just a courthouse clerk counting minutes until her next appointment." "We already did that 2 years ago," Elena reminded him. "I know, but I want to do it again, bigger, more intentional. I want to marry you in front of everyone who matters and make it very clear that this isn't a business arrangement or a social convenience. It's real, and I choose it every day." Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest. "That's possibly the most romantic thing you've ever said." "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain." Adrian's smile was soft, the version reserved only for her. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." They planned the ceremony for early autumn when the gardens would be perfect. Small but deliberate. Maya as Elena's maid of honor, Marcus standing up for Adrian, Sarah managing logistics because that's what she did best. No press, no society photographers, just people who actually cared about them witnessing something real. Elena's parents weren't invited. She'd stopped feeling guilty about that somewhere around the second year of her marriage, when she'd finally accepted that some relationships were too damaged to salvage. They sent cards on holidays that Elena read and filed away, maintaining minimal contact that satisfied legal obligations without requiring emotional investment. But Victoria came to the ceremony, sitting quietly in the back and leaving before the reception. It was enough. Baby steps toward something that might eventually resemble a functional sibling relationship, or might not. Either way, Elena had stopped needing it to define her. The ceremony was simple: vows they'd written themselves, rings they chose together, a celebration that felt genuine instead of performative. When the officiant pronounced them married for the 3rd time, Adrian kissed Elena like he meant it, and she kissed back with the certainty of someone who'd finally found where she belonged. At the reception, Maya cornered Elena by the champagne table. "I'm proud of you," Maya said, slightly drunk and aggressively sincere. "You took the craziest risk I've ever seen, and you turned it into this, into a life that actually fits you." "I got lucky," Elena said. "You got brave. There's a difference." Maya hugged her hard. "You could have stayed in that house being invisible forever. Instead, you jumped off a cliff and learned to fly on the way down. That's not luck. That's courage." After the reception, after the guests left and the caterers cleaned up, Elena and Adrian stood in the garden watching stars appear in the darkening sky. 3 years ago, Elena had been a girl nobody saw, drowning in a family that treated her like an inconvenience. Now she was a woman who'd ransomed her husband from criminals, designed parks that served communities, and built a marriage that started as a transaction and became something neither of them could have predicted. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Adrian. "The contract, the arrangement, all of it." "Every day," Adrian said, and Elena's heart dropped before he continued. "I regret that it took me so long to find you, that I wasted years being strategic instead of being honest, That I almost let you walk away a dozen times because I was too afraid to admit I needed someone. You don't need me. You'd be fine without me. I'd survive without you. That's not the same as being fine. Adrian pulled her closer, their bodies fitting together with the ease of practice. You make me want to be less careful, more human. That's terrifying, but it's also the only thing that's made me feel alive in years. Elena thought about that first dinner when her family had celebrated Victoria's engagement to a man they'd never bothered to know. About Adrian walking in and destroying their plans with 5 cold words. About a contract signed in a lawyer's office and burned in a private ceremony 2 years later. She thought about the girl she'd been, invisible, forgotten, desperate for approval from people who'd never valued her. And she thought about the woman she'd become, still imperfect, still figuring things out, but no longer waiting for permission to exist. Worth wasn't something Adrian had given her by choosing her over Victoria. It wasn't something she'd earned through the garden projects or the society galas or any external achievement. It was something she'd always had, buried under years of being told she wasn't enough. All Adrian had done was recognize what was already there. And in recognizing it, he'd given her space to recognize it herself. Standing in the garden under emerging stars, Elena realized the greatest gift wasn't being seen by the right person. It was learning to see herself clearly and accept what she found there, flawed and brave, and entirely enough. I love you, she told Adrian, the words easier now after years of practice. I love you too, he said, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and promises kept. Somewhere in the city, her family was living their own complicated lives, making their own mistakes, learning their own lessons, or refusing to. Somewhere, Victoria was trying to rebuild herself from the wreckage of performed perfection. Somewhere, people were making calculated arrangements and signing contracts meant to protect them from the messiness of actual feeling. But here, in this garden she'd designed, married to a man she'd chosen and been chosen by, Elena Volkov was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone else had validated her existence, but because she'd finally learned to validate herself. And that, she thought, was worth every risk she'd taken to get here. The stars came out fully, pinpricks of light in the darkness, each one burning with the same intensity, regardless of whether anyone was watching. Elena had spent years being invisible, waiting to be noticed, believing her value came from external recognition. But stars didn't shine for audiences. They burned because burning was what they did. She'd been burning all along. It just took walking away from people who refused to see it before she could recognize the light in herself. Adrian's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and solid and real. They stood together in silence, 2 people who'd started with a contract and ended with something that couldn't be reduced to legal terms. Love, partnership, home. None of it looked the way she'd expected, but all of it felt right in ways that mattered more than expectations. Ready to go inside? Adrian asked eventually. Elena took one last look at the garden, at the life she'd built from courage and calculated risk and refusing to stay invisible. Then she squeezed his hand and smiled. Yeah, let's go home. And they did.